Chapter 360. This is not foolishness. It is possible to be completely lost in the cycle of life, and the opportunity to seek confirmation is rare. If you miss this life, you don't know how long you will have to wait. Perhaps Apollo would have been strong enough at that time and would no longer have to fear Ammon. Since Hermes was beheaded, Apollo has been worried about suffering the same fate. How could he not take the opportunity to do something? John still sneered. If he had such thoughts, I'm afraid he would never become stronger. Although I have not transcended eternal life, I also know that Ammonius did not return to the world for Apollo, and Ammonius' search for confirmation has nothing to do with Apollo. Is it wise for him to do so? Ammonius was shot down by Lord Schrödinger in the clouds with an arrow. The past is over, and it has been made clear at the beginning. Themis also shook her head. Of course it is not wise. In fact, Yelena, who has a grudge with Ammon, is very clear-headed. For the past 300 years, she has never asked about Ammon. John, I did not come for Ammon, but for you. I wanted to save you from the cage. Seeing you now, it is clear that you can escape on your own. You have reached the realm of cultivation in this life, and when you go out, there is hope to meet the final test and truly transcend eternal life. John stroked her shoulder and asked meaningfully, after transcending eternal life, where will I go? Themis pressed her cheek against his chest and replied, you have received the guidance of Allah's faith in this life, so of course you can go to Allah's heaven, which is also Ammon's heaven. If you are willing to let me take you out of the dungeon, there is actually another choice. I have sought confirmation from the Lord of Heaven, but I did not create a world in the eternal life, but waited for the opportunity. In his life as a disciple of Ammon, John did not understand the various achievements after transcending eternal life, but Themis had already given him a detailed explanation with the information of the divine arts. Even if he could not understand the mysteries of the divine cultivation, he could understand the meaning of the various realms. John was slightly startled and asked, can I become the ruler of heaven without creating my own heaven kingdom? Themis replied, yes, Zeus and Ammon both sought confirmation of the Lord of Heaven at the same time as they created the kingdom of heaven, but later generations have had reference, and it is not necessary to create the kingdom of heaven to achieve success, such as Pythagoras. This is also a kind of choice. It means that you can create a kingdom of heaven in eternity at any time. It also means that your soul already has such a world. John nodded and said, I understand what you mean, but I will not leave this place. Themis looked up at him. If you don't leave here, you will be executed, just before you transcend eternal life. If you go out, you can still usher in the final test of transcending eternal life. Let me take you out, and you can make another choice. John sighed. What I am waiting for is the final test of this life. If I go out, I will not usher in it. The so-called test of fate, judgment of the end of days is not only the whirlpool and lightning that unfolds in eternity. As John the Baptist, I pursue the perfection of this life. My God is still Ammon, and God will not be tempted by eternal life. Themis was also sighing, and when she raised her face, her eyes were full of tears. I also understand that I can't take you away from here. As a goddess, she already had the realm of the Lord of Heaven, so there was no need for John to say more. The cause and effect of all this was clear in Themis' heart. The Olympian gods mistakenly thought that John was the reincarnated Ammon and Herod wanted to kill him. John did not want to explain, and he was more than happy to cause this misunderstanding. He was not only protecting his God, but also the faith in his heart. Even if John the Baptist died, the faith he spread would still exist. And Ammon could also temporarily avoid the interference of the Olympian gods to complete his quest. For John's faith, if he chose to walk out of the cage, he could naturally save his life. But in this way, even if he had achieved the 9th level of the power of origin, he would not be able to reach the perfection of the state of mind, and he would never be able to meet the final test in this life. John held Themis' face, bowed his head, and kissed away the tears overflowing from the corners of her eyes. He said softly, Herod's butcher's knife is the final test of my life. With this achievement, the reincarnated soul will not be lost. Since you have found me in this life, I will find you in the next life. Themis said, you will definitely go to Amon's heaven. Do you know where to find me? Hardedef said, you can create your kingdom of heaven where I am going and guide me here. Isn't this also your wish? He was reminding Themis that she could actually create her own world in Amon's kingdom of angels, just like Prometheus had fused the Olympian heaven with his world. Themis replied, this requires two conditions. One is that Amon has returned to heaven, and the other is that he has achieved the true realm of the gods. John smiled. You finally changed the way you address Amon as Ammonius. In fact, I want to tell you that if Ammonius' wish is fulfilled in this life, Ammonius will return to his heaven, and by then, he will be the god of the gods. The realm that Zeus once sought is just a natural goal for Ammonius. Themis asked with some surprise, you have not transcended eternal life, yet you can see it more clearly than me, the Lord of Heaven, how can you be so sure? John replied, it is precisely because I have not transcended eternal life that I can see the various possibilities from the starting point of the path, and with the reference of predecessors, I can understand the various differences. When Amon created his heaven, his first promise was to merge the Ennead and the Anunnaki divine kingdoms, and guide the gods of the ancient divine clan to enjoy the eternal world. You are not the first to try, Allah and Anu are, and this is the foundation of Ammonius. So as long as his achievements reach a perfect state, he will naturally be able to seek confirmation of the God of the gods, and this is the situation that Amat's great prophecy referred to. Before Ammonius re-entered the human world, he was already the Lord of Heaven, and when he returned to heaven, it meant that the realm was complete, and whether he had broken through to a higher unknown realm or not, he had already sought confirmation of the God of the gods. All of this should have happened before I became an angel, and at that time, if you want, you can find me in heaven, in your world. Themis nodded, when Ammonius returns to heaven, I will enter heaven, accept his guidance, and create my spiritual world in the kingdom of angels. I will wait for you there, and you will eventually find me. Salome returned to the palace hall and bowed to Herod, Father, I have asked for mother's opinion, and the reward I want is, the head of John the Baptist. As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar, some were stunned, and some exclaimed, Oh my God, what a terrible voice, what a vicious beauty. Herod had known this result, but pretended to be surprised and said, What, my dear daughter, did I hear wrong? You actually want the head of John the Baptist? Salome replied expressionlessly, Yes, Father, you did not hear wrong. John refused my love, and he would rather walk into that cage for the rest of his life, so I will fulfill his wish. There was another burst of surprised discussion in the palace. It turned out that there was such a story. Herod's stepdaughter Salome actually fell in love with John the Baptist, and her courtship failed, so she wanted John's head. Herod put down his glass and said, I have promised you all possible rewards, and since you have decided, then I will give you John's head. Not long after, John's head was served on a plate, and many guests closed their eyes as they could not bear to see this bloody scene. Salome's expression remained unchanged as she picked up the head and kissed Hardedef's forehead and lips in front of everyone. She then raised her head and said, Father, I have another request. Please let me bury him. Finally, John was executed, and Herod was also satisfied. He pretended to be regretful and waved his hand, Go, bury him well. The news that the beloved John the Baptist had died at the hands of the peerless dancer Salome quickly spread across the Salem plain. There were different versions of the folk story, and one of the most famous legends accused Herod of his crimes. Herod was lustful, and not only did he marry his brother's wife, but he also coveted his young and beautiful niece and stepdaughter, Salome, and asked Salome to strip and dance at his birthday party. Salome endured this humiliation, wore 7 layers of gauze, and danced for Herod, but made a request. She wanted John the Baptist because she fell in love with him. At this point, the legend was divided into 2 versions. Some said that John refused Salome's courtship, so Salome ordered people to cut off John's head, and held it up to kiss his lips. Others said that Herod hated John for obtaining Salome's heart, so he ordered people to give his head to the peerless dancer. This legend later became a folk story of the gods, and its name was, the 7 Layers of Gauze. Whatever the truth of the matter, John the Baptist was indeed dead, and the Olympian gods and Herod were rid of their mortal enemies. And Salome disappeared after burying John, and there was no trace of her in history. When John said goodbye to the world in the city of Salem, Yoro seemed to have been summoned by something, and he also left the place of penance, crossed the inland lake, and returned to the Salem plain again. At this time, he was already a great achiever, and such a rate of progress not only amazed ordinary people, but also made the so-called geniuses of the world feel ashamed. But if one knew his identity, none of this would be surprising, because he was Ammonius who was reincarnated on earth. 2 years had passed since he was baptized by the Jordan River and returned to the Salem plain after the end of his penance, and Yoro had actually passed the test of endless life and death. There had always been two views on the experience of witnessing endless life and death. One was to regard it as the experience of many living beings in the world, and the other was to regard it as the experience of one's own soul reincarnating on earth. For passing the test, as long as one's mind was firm and unmoved, there was no difference. 2 more chapters for today, and the second chapter will be added later. Chapter 361. But Yesu did not witness Ammonius' experiences in the test. He only witnessed the 300 years of reincarnation, so the test was easy for him. Why did Yesu not witness Ammonius' experiences in the endless cycle of life and death? Because the endless cycle of life and death was only an achievement of mortals, and Ammonius' re-entry into the cycle of reincarnation was a brand new beginning. Interestingly, Yesu passed the test of the endless cycle of life and death easily, much easier than the initial test of the awakening of desire. It seemed that the higher his understanding, the easier it was to pass the test, which was somewhat incredible. Yesu returned to the Dailang plains and traveled north along the Jordan River, preaching and spreading Allah's faith and guidance along the way, just as John had done. But he was obviously more successful than John, and the influence he left behind was much greater than that of John. There seemed to be endless spells in the magical staff, and as long as Yesu's cultivation of the power of origin reached a certain level, he could learn all kinds of skills he wanted to learn. He was already an excellent supreme sorcerer. The term sorcerer was not derogatory in the Dailang plains, but had replaced the original title of the supreme sorcerer. But Yesu never claimed to be a sorcerer. He was only a preacher of faith, which was very much like Aristotle back then. Yesu was not a pedantic person. In fact, he was very smart, had the best eloquence in the world, and was also good at using all kinds of human means. Among all kinds of magic, his practice was the most focused. And his highest attainment was in the blessings of blessings. In particular, he had almost reached the pinnacle of the human world with the nose-healing divine art of blessing divine art. He also treated people while preaching, doing good and saving people along the way, which made his preaching the greatest popularity, and more followers. Treating people's suffering was not only Yesu's good deed, but also a means to attract more people to listen to his preaching and accept true guidance. In such an era, the level of medical care among the people was very backward. Many people's illnesses could not be treated in time and effectively. Ordinary doctors often used some analgesic herbs to treat various illnesses. Most of the illnesses were actually cured by the patients themselves. The healing magic of the divine blessing magic was, of course, a miraculous method, but most ordinary people had no chance to enjoy it. Magicians would not waste their magic power to cure everyone. If they overused their magic power, they would also consume their life force. In fact, the number of sorcerers today was no more than the number of mages in the past. Those who mastered healing magic were few and far between. Moreover, they were of noble status. Asking for healing magic was an unimaginable luxury for ordinary people. But Yola didn't care about these things. He didn't hold back on the power he had, nor did he deliberately publicize his miraculous abilities. He only treated people's sufferings. In the process, Jorg told the people that it was not only the body that needed to be healed. His mission here was to guide the people to the temple of the soul. Instead, he chose those with the highest aptitude and comprehension to be his disciples. They would follow him and help him in his cause. In the beginning, there were 12 disciples. These 12 disciples maintained order when Yola preached, followed him on the road, and provided all kinds of help when healing. They were also awakened to the power to heal people and spread the faith Yola preached among the people. It was when he led the disciples north along the Jedn River that Yola heard the news of John's death. John's disciples went south along the Jedn River and found Yola, who was healing people in the village. They knelt on the ground and cried, "Our guide, John the Baptist, has left. May I ask if you are the one in Elijah's prophecy?" Yola neither admitted nor denied it. He sighed and replied, "John the Baptist was a sincere and reliable messenger and guardian of God. He was a great prophet. I respect him, and like him, I don't need any title. I just want to help and guide all those who are willing to accept the baptism of Allah's glory." Just like that, John's disciples followed Yola. Behind Yola's team, there were two people who followed far behind. John's encounter was already a reminder. The angels in heaven were worried that Yola would also suffer the same accident, so they sent Madanzo and Link, who were most familiar with the Dilang Plains, to secretly protect their god. In front of Yola, Moses and Elijah also came to the human world, quietly observing all unusual dangers. These 4 angels never took the initiative to approach Yola. They only mingled in the Dilang Plains as mortals, careful not to reveal anything unusual. They naturally did not dare to interfere with Yola's nose-grinding in the human world, but if the gods of Olympus came to the human world to harm Yola, they would appear to stop them. Especially gods like Apollo, Madanzo wanted to kill them with his own hands. Today, Madanzo was already an archangel, and one of the most powerful archangels. But the journey was peaceful. There was no movement from the Olympian gods or their messengers. According to the news from heaven, the Olympian gods had been acting normally. It seemed that they really regarded Hardadef as a reincarnated Amon. After Hardadef's death in this life, it could be said that he missed the best opportunity in the past 300 years, so they temporarily relaxed their surveillance. On the contrary, Yola's behavior, while gaining the people's love, also aroused the jealousy of many people. Those who hated Yola were not gods. On this day, Madanzo followed Yola's team from afar. He frowned and asked Link, although Apollo was behind John's encounter, it was the Dilang who cut off his head. One day, people here will realize that Yola is the prophesied Messiah, the son of Allah in the legend of the Dilang. Yola did not want to hide his identity, he just did not want to announce it. When that time comes, I am afraid that he will suffer the same fate as John. Link smiled bitterly. Our God has his reasons for doing this, maybe this is what he wants. I just think it is a little funny. Ammonius is Allah, he came to the human world to prove his vow. But when the Dilang heard Ilya's prophecy, they called him the son of Allah. How will all this be explained in the future? It is very difficult for mortals to understand. Madanzo also smiled bitterly. Don't worry about this. If Yola's cultivation is perfect in this life, people will naturally explain it in their own way. Haven't you heard of the various myths on the continent? In short, people will not be willing to think that the son of Allah is the son of a carpenter, so naturally there will be a magical and far-fetched story. I am worried about another thing. When the Dilang finally realize that the son of Allah is not the king they imagined, what will happen in their disappointment? Link could not help but nod. Yes, the title of Dilang or Dilang is just a division of their internal status. In the eyes of people outside the Dilang plane, the people here are all Dilang, and their god is Allah. The son of Allah that the Dilang are looking forward to is actually a king like Alexander or Kaiser, who will lead the Dilang to rule the continent. For hundreds of years, people have been looking forward to the appearance of this king, and even fantasizing about what kind of power they will have in the new kingdom. Madanzo sighed with emotion. Once Yola admits that he is the prophesied Messiah, people will find out that the kingdom he is guiding is not that kind of empire. They will call him a liar, and I am afraid that Yola will also be severely punished. Link sighed again. It is not that Yola is deceiving the people, it is that they would rather deceive themselves. But you should also see that there are so many people following Yola, and his influence is growing. The temple of the mind is migrating to the Dailang plain, and the outline of this kingdom has already appeared. Maybe that day will come, and we will not have to worry about it anymore. Madanzo said in a deep voice, that would be the best, but trouble will still continue to appear in front of Yola. Look, there is trouble now. Link comforted, that is our God, although he is immortal in the reincarnation, he should be able to handle it. Yola had indeed encountered a small problem. He had just arrived at a relatively large town and walked into the open hall of the Temple of Allah. This hall was not only a place where the priests regularly preached, but also a place where the people gathered. If anything important happened in the town, it would be announced here, and it was also a place where all kinds of rumors spread. The day Yola arrived happened to be the Sabbath of the Dailang people. Allah and Moses had agreed on 10 commandments, the fourth of which was, the tribesmen work very hard, after 6 days of work, they should rest for a day, and should not be forced to work again. This was the origin of the tradition of the Sabbath. But the Dailang elders, who thought that they controlled the will of the gods, later turned this agreement into a strict rule. All work activities were prohibited on the Sabbath, and even farmers working in their own fields was regarded as a violation of the will of the gods. Doctors treated patients, which was also a kind of work, but on the Sabbath, doctors did not dare to treat patients easily, unless the patient was about to die. As for the priests in the temple, they naturally would not answer people's prayers on this day, and in many towns, the priests who mastered the magic were often the best doctors, or even the only doctors. Yola's reputation had long spread along the banks of the Jordan River, and coincidentally, an incident happened in the town. A man fell from a building and lost feeling in one of his arms. If he did not get treatment as soon as possible, his arm might become disabled, and he would not be able to use it to work and earn money for his family. Chapter 362. When Aman led the disciples into the hall, the wounded man knelt in front of Yola and begged with the help of his family, while the townspeople watched from the side. Some people sympathized with the unfortunate man and hoped that Jonah could heal him. Others, such as the priests in the temple, were gloating over his misfortune. It was a dilemma. If Yola did not heal the wounded man, he would be violating the mercy of the Aloha that he preached. But if Yola treated the wounded man today, he would be violating the commandment of the Aloha that the elders of the Aloha called. Yola looked around and understood what was going on. The cold priests had purposely created this problem for him and were waiting to grab hold of him. Yola stepped forward and reached out to help the wounded man up, saying, "God loves the world, please get up." The wounded man was involuntarily lifted up by a force, but he was still there pleading, "I heard that you have been preaching the faith of the Aloha everywhere, treating people all the way, and you are a magical doctor. Please heal my arm too." As he spoke, he grabbed Yola's arm and did not let go. Yola smiled and asked, "Stranger, which hand are you using to grab me?" The man was stunned, and then everyone in the hall was stunned, because the man used the injured and unconscious hand to grab Yola's sleeve. Just as Yola held onto his arm to help Hua Hua get up, he healed his arm without batting an eyelid. It was not a very serious injury, but if it was not treated in time, it was very likely that it would be disabled. Yola did not tell him, "I am treating you," or, "I want to treat you," but he did it with one hand. The man moved his arm, and except for some tearing pain in his joints, his entire arm had completely regained feeling and mobility. He exclaimed, "Thank you, thank God. You must be God's messenger, spreading the voice of God." "Wow!" Everyone in the hall exclaimed, and everyone began to whisper, praising Yola's magic. The priests who were waiting to watch the show were a little disheartened. They had wanted to find fault with Yola while he was treating the wounded man. If Yola was a doctor, he would have to treat the patient, and if Yola was a magician, he would have to cast divine spells, right? However, Yola was even more brilliant than they had imagined. Just by supporting him, he was able to resolve the pain. Jordan's disciples couldn't help but secretly laugh. Wasn't this injured person just a dislocated joint? Was there a need to make such a big commotion? It was as if they were putting on a show. But Joel didn't forget those who wanted to use this incident to embarrass him. He looked around and said, "Today is the Sabbath, and God made a promise with Moses. The tribesmen are very hard. After 6 days of work, they should rest for a day. They should not be forced to work." This is God's way of telling us to be kind, not telling us to refuse to do good on the Sabbath, which would be a violation of God's will. I know all this in my heart, that someone refused to cure this poor wounded man on the Sabbath, and let him come here to me. I would like to ask all of you, including those people, if you fell on the Sabbath, would you like someone to reach out and help you? God directs us away from sin and toward good works. If a man sins on the Sabbath, should he be stopped? We can rest on the Sabbath, and we should rest, but we should also do what we should do, and we should not stop the kindness of others. Stopping good is also evil, and stopping evil is also good. What kind of day do you think the Sabbath is? What choice is in line with God's will? After saying this, Joel led his disciples away from the meeting hall and went to rest under a big tree by the river next to the town. But what happened in the meeting hall spread throughout the town. In the evening, people kept coming to salute Joel under the tree and brought him and his disciples all kinds of food. It was as if the whole town was grateful for what he had done, and even more grateful for the inspiration his words had given them. Not only did Joel solve the problem of the priests of Taeklang, but he was also welcomed by the local people. When he preached under the tree the next day, many people gathered around him, and people didn't even go to the temple hall anymore. Obviously, if they had to choose, people would prefer to get the guidance of the Arrow River from Joel. Such a scene made several priests in the Taeklang temple feel a chill in their hearts. Joel's appearance meant that their position was shaken. The tree by the river had become a temple in people's hearts because of Joel's existence. They couldn't let this man continue to do this. They were going to write to the elders in Taeklang to report what had happened. They had to find a way to get rid of such a dangerous person. Just then, a priest said, "Yesterday in the temple, Joel said, stopping evil is good, and stopping good is evil. Today, someone came to report that he was preaching under the tree about God's forgiveness and mercy. Then let's give him another problem. The mayor has brought the sheriff to catch a criminal. Let them bring the criminal to the tree by the river and see what Joel will do with him." While Joel was preaching to the townspeople under the tree, there was a sudden noise in the distance. Someone was shouting, "Townspeople, stop that criminal. Knock him down with stones." A man stumbled into the crowd and was soon held down by the people around him. His hands were tied behind his back, and Joel's preaching was interrupted. Everyone was looking at the captured fugitive. Someone recognized him and exclaimed, "Oh my God, isn't that Chiu Qianren? That sinful scoundrel, thank God, we've finally caught him." The fugitive named Chiu Qianren seemed to know where he was. He raised his head and shouted, "Why are you arresting me? Who among you is a pure and righteous man? Please tell me. If any of you are innocent before God, you can stone me to death. If not, what right do you have to accuse me of my crimes? In front of the Arrow River, all people are sinners. Someone is preaching about God's forgiveness and mercy. Why do you have to tie me up here?" Rather than yelling at the townspeople, it was more accurate to say that he was interrogating Yoda. Chiu Qianren only shouted at Joel. As he spoke, he had already stood up. He looked very fierce and ferocious, and the sheriff did not stop him. However, before he could take 2 steps, Joel had already raised his cane and knocked him to the ground. Chiu Qianren was hit so hard that he could not get up again. Yola shouted, "Your crime is your crime. Even if you escaped, it doesn't prove that you're innocent. You've been captured because of what you've done. The existence of sin in the world is not an excuse for evil deeds. You have to bear the consequences of your choices. Everyone should be punished for their mistakes. Just because there are many crimes in the world, one cannot become innocent and wrong can become right. Even if there is no righteous person here, you should still be punished. Only in this way can the world be further away from sin and closer to good." There are not all righteous people in the world, but you cannot allow sin to cover your shame. Since you know that you are guilty, it means that you know the consequences when you make a choice. Even if you get rid of the pursuit, you still have to accept hatred and condemnation. If everyone else is guilty, it does not prove that your sin is noble. People can be unrighteous, but they cannot laugh at righteous people, and they cannot accuse others of being unrighteous because of their own mistakes. That is an even deeper sin. Why do we need to examine our hearts? What does God's forgiveness and mercy mean? If people examine their hearts and bear the consequences of their actions, they can usher in a new life for their souls. The new life of the soul is not only after you die, but also after you pay the price and stop doing evil things like you did today. Otherwise, you will never be free, whether it is in the human world or hell. In this world, not only can evil be punished, but good can also punish evil. Look at the sheriff behind you. He might have stolen his neighbor's chicken when he was young, but it does not mean that he cannot carry out his duty to catch you. If he allows you to continue committing crimes, that will be his unforgivable and unforgivable crime. Sheriff, what are you still standing there for? Let this person interrupt my preaching with Satan's voice. Quickly carry out your duty and take him to your yamen. Chiu Qianren had been hit by Joseph's staff, and his entire body was sore and weak. Under the crowd's gaze, the mayor ordered the sheriff to take him away. People were still discussing what Joseph had just said. One of Joseph's disciples was also named John, who had the same name as the famous John the Baptist. He frowned and whispered to his companion, "Joseph's words are very reasonable, but if it gets out, I'm afraid it will affect the teacher's reputation." Almost everyone in this world has made mistakes and had sinful thoughts in their hearts. They hope to be forgiven by God in prayer. Our guide should be a forgiving person. Such a thing is not enough to describe his great sentiments. Another disciple whispered, "We can tell people another story." A sinner knelt in front of Joseph, and Joseph asked the people, "Who is the righteous?" John nodded and said, "People love to hear that kind of story. It is more infectious." At that moment, Joseph sighed and asked the crowd, "Who is the righteous?" John and another disciple were shocked and quickly stopped talking to listen to the preaching. Yori continued, "Let us hold a ceremony and pray to Eloho. This prayer is not only for God, but also for ourselves. We have no reason to inflict evil on others. God's forgiveness and kindness are to forgive and purify the soul. Even if our souls are not purified, do not lose the true guidance and stay away from the direction of light." His words were not only for the people to hear, but also for the disciples to hear. After that, he knelt down under the tree with the staff in his hand and entered a state of prayer and meditation. The people around him also knelt down and prayed like Joseph. Chapter 363. It was a black bear with a white, crescent-shaped mark on its chest. It knelt there, looking like a human. Its body was very sturdy, and it was as tall as the person next to it standing up. It closed its eyes slightly and looked very focused and pious. However, a bear imitating people's prayers in such a serious situation was comical no matter how one looked at it. What was interesting was that there was a blue bag beside it. It seemed that the black bear had carried it himself. At this moment, someone reminded his companions in a low voice, "Don't be afraid, it's a bear raised by a family called Lassalu on the outskirts of Bethany on the other side of the river. It's raised like a human and has a good temper. It's often bullied by the children in the village." The frightened people heaved a sigh of relief. Yola looked at the bear and said gently to the crowd, "Don't worry, it doesn't think of itself as a bear. Perhaps it doesn't understand what we're doing, but it's praying like us." Until the sky darkened, the bear maintained its posture of prayer from beginning to end. Finally, the sky was completely dark and the townspeople had all dispersed. Only Yola and his disciples were left under the tree. It was quiet everywhere, and the moonlight shone through the shadows of the trees. The bear finally stood up and used its slightly thick and short forelimbs to pick up the blue cloth bundle. It walked upright like a human with a pair of large bare paws and arrived in front of Yola. It put the bag on the ground and bent down to open it with its front paws. There were a few pieces of bread and 3 apples inside. Bears were omnivores. If it was a bear raised by a human, this would be its food. However, it was now offered to Yola. Yola looked at the bread and apples and asked calmly, "You're offering your food to me. Do you have something to ask of me?" The bear couldn't speak, but it seemed to understand Yola. It kept nodding its large head and raised its front paw to point upstream across the river with a pleading expression. The disciples were all confused. Yola picked up the bag on the ground and stood up. "It wants to invite me to a place. Let's follow it." Many people had asked Yola to treat them, even the most remote villages. However, this was the first time he had followed a bear in the middle of the night. Wasn't he afraid of danger in the middle of the night? The disciples, knowing that their guide had nothing to fear, followed the curious follower to the river. The big bear walked into the river and swam to the other side. It stood up on the shore and shook its fur. Obviously, it was waiting for Umo and the others to come over. Yola looked down at the blue bag in his hand and saw that there were obvious teeth marks on it. The bear must have swum over from the other side of the river with the bag in its mouth. The food in the bag wasn't even wet. What happened next was even more amazing. Yola stepped onto the water with his staff and said to his disciples, "Follow me." The disciples followed Jesus cautiously, and the ripples on the Jordan River became a footpath. The water was still slightly turbulent, and they walked over it. The bear turned again and began to walk upriver along a path, shuffling upright in the moonlight, neither too fast nor too slow, just long enough for York and the others to follow. One of the disciples frowned and said, "That bear is really strong. Isn't it tired of standing and walking like that? A bear can run much faster than this if it puts its front paws down on all fours. Since it's leading the way for us, why doesn't it walk faster?" The one who spoke was called Judas, which was the name Yola gave him. No one knew why Yola gave his disciples such a name. Hearing the question, Yola smiled and replied, "It's night, and it's a black bear. It doesn't dare to walk too fast, afraid that we'll lose it. Besides, you're asking why it's walking on its feet. Aren't you walking upright yourself?" Judas was stunned and said in confusion, "I'm a human. Of course I can walk on my feet." Yola smiled again. People can walk on their feet, but newborn babies know that it's easier to crawl than walk. I said that bear doesn't think of itself as a bear at all. In its mind, it thinks of itself as a human. People walk on their feet, so of course it has to walk on its feet. Judas scratched the back of his head and said, "That's interesting. How can there be such a bear?" Yola explained patiently, "I heard that babies raised by wolves in the mountains won't be able to speak when they grow up. Their behavior will also become wolf-like because they don't know that they're human and no one has taught them how to be human. This bear should have been adopted since it was young. It hasn't seen other bears and thinks that it's the same as humans. All its behavior is imitating humans." Hearing this, Judas seemed to have received some kind of inspiration. He changed the topic and asked, "I'm afraid that not all bears will be like this after being raised by humans. Not only is this bear especially smart and docile, but it also depends on how it's been treated. In fact, humans are the same. Respected guide, I've been thinking about something today. When I was in town, everyone heard the same preaching, but their gains were different. Their understanding and reactions were also different. Some people will be grateful to you, but others will hate you and even want to harm you. Walking on this path, I feel like I can already see the future." Yola was still smiling. At this moment, his expression was somewhat similar to that of Aesop. He used a story as an analogy. God sent a farmer to sow the seeds of all things on the earth. Some of the seeds fell on thorns and could only grow in the cracks, carefully avoiding the thorns on the thorns. They were swallowed by the thorns before they could be harvested. Some seeds fell on shallow soil covered with gravel. If there was enough rain, they could also germinate, but if the environment was slightly bad, the new seedlings would wither. Some seeds fell on fertile and suitable soil, which was most worth cultivating. I might be that farmer, and you, the disciples who follow me, are the most fertile fields. However, God scattered the seeds on the entire earth with the hope of harvesting. He didn't deliberately favor anyone, just as I preached to everyone. Judas nodded and understood what Yola meant. He couldn't help but praise the wisdom of the guide in his heart. However, Yola sighed again under the curtain of the night and said, I've been to the Far East and heard a saying from an even more distant place. That's Kunlun, which is even further away than India, where I've been before. A person called Tai Shang once said, the world is heartless and treats all things as straw dogs. I've said so much to you just now, but he only used one sentence to understand everything. I haven't reached that realm yet, and I'm still searching. Therefore, I can only talk to you about my own understanding. Judas fell into deep thought. He continued to follow the bear beside Yola. The night gradually darkened. After a while, he seemed to think of something and couldn't help but say, Respected guide, you should be clear about what happened in that town yesterday and the day before. The appearance of the injured and the criminal wasn't a coincidence. It was clearly arranged by someone to make things difficult for you. You weren't made things difficult for them. You stuck to your beliefs and moved more people. However, in this way, some people will hate you even more. You're like a thorn in their hearts. Your existence will torture them until they can't eat or sleep in peace. Yola looked at the big black bears staggering back with a smile. He made another analogy to his disciples. We came into this world. Everything is unfamiliar and unknown. From unfamiliar to familiar, people have all kinds of relationships while dealing with each other. If there's such a kind of person, you've never hurt them. You've never done anything to hinder them. The words you say, the stories you tell, they're unwilling to accept, but they feel that it hurts their thoughts. Therefore, they don't want you to appear and don't want you to say your own words again. What should you do? Judas thought for a moment and said, Now that you mention it, I remember a lot of things. There really is such a kind of person in the world. It's not only because of the reason you just said that they don't want to see you appear. It's not because you've hurt them. It's even the simplest and most hilarious reason. Perhaps it's because you didn't do things the way they wanted you to do, but you obtained your own achievements. Therefore, when they think of you, they feel uncomfortable. When they see you, they feel inexplicably stimulated. Yola, who had always been serious, also said in a joking tone, Then let them be excited or disgusted. They think they've found a kind of climax. The pain in their souls is self-inflicted. You don't have to escape or change yourself because of that. My appearance is only to guide those who are willing to accept the guidance, not because they want me to come, and not because they want me to go. To tell you the truth, do you think I care? If that kind of soul is not stung by me, I would feel sorry. Judas blinked, carefully reflecting on Yola's words, and did not say anything along the way. That night, in the town on the other side of the river, the priests in the holy temple had already become somewhat angry. When they heard that Joseph had crossed the river, they unanimously decided to immediately send a letter to the elders of Salem, accusing Joseph of using the power of Satan to bewitch people. Yola was completely unaware of this, but Madanzo and Link, who were following in secret, knew it clearly. The two angels muttered to themselves, and Madanzo said, Do these priests want to die? They live in the temple of Allah, and actually want to use the name of Allah to frame Allah, who has come to earth. Link said, It seems that Yola doesn't know yet. Since we've met, we have to do something about it, right? Madanzo replied, Don't worry, wait for the messenger to set off, and we'll take him down halfway. Throwing it to Yola along with the secret letter he sent out can be considered a reminder. Of course, Yola, who was hurrying along, did not know the plan of the two angels. At this time, the sky was gradually brightening, and they had been trekking on foot all night with a black bear walking upright. One of the disciples said, Why is it so far? Where does this bear want to take us? Yola shook his head and said, I don't know where it is taking us, but it's obvious that it has walked a long way to find me. How difficult it is for a bear. Chapter 364. Recently, many readers have been guessing how many chapters Tian Shu has left. Actually, there is no need to guess. I have already said that Tian Shu, Earth Master, and Spiritual Mountain are the same. They all have 360 chapters. In other words, it will be finished in the middle of May this year. This has been confirmed long before I put pen to paper. So far, I have published Fugue, Ghost Stalks, Human Desire, Spiritual Mountain, Earth Master, and Tian Shu on the internet. They are all independent stories that focus on different themes and take place in different backgrounds. Even the writing style is different. However, if someone reads all the stories in this series, they will find that there are many very interesting connections between them. In fact, I started thinking about this series of stories many years ago, long before online literature appeared. Thanks to the arrival of the internet era, thanks to a platform like the internet, I have the opportunity to write and publish them. The process of writing is also the process of perfecting various thoughts. Heaven, earth, man, ghost, God, spirit, they cannot be summarized with a single theme. What I write is what I see in the world. Then, I let my imagination run wild. The various systems interweave with each other and become a complete world in words. When Tian Shu is finished, I have finally described this grand concept. It is a weave of the knowledge, thinking, imagination, and various characters over the years. I did not expect that I would finish it. But looking back, I have really finished it. I have used words to build a grand world of reality, thinking, and dreams. It contains stories from ancient and modern times, Chinese and foreign, and the origins of various thoughts. There is the heavenly court, the immortal world, the spiritual mountain, and the heavenly kingdom. There are stories between gods, immortals, and Buddhas, stories between gods and humans. There are also stories about how ordinary mortals become gods, immortals, and Buddhas. It also includes the stories of the mortals around us, and the stories that are happening in the pugilistic world. Of course, limited by my knowledge, I can only describe it to the best of my ability. What I express is my understanding. Some readers have asked me why I call Fugue, Ghost Stalks, and Human Desire, the God, Ghost, and Man trilogy, instead of Heaven, Earth, Man, Ghost, and Spirit 6 parts. Of course, it was not because they were written the earliest, but because the main plots of these 3 novels had a relatively close connection, and they all happened in the background of modern life. All the foreshadowing in the other stories was finally collected in the end. Some people have also asked me about the era in which the main setting of the story takes place. Dubhe should be the first, followed by Spiritual Mountain, and then Fugue. Why didn't I write Dubhe first? Because I don't want to. If I write Dubhe in that order as the first book, people might misunderstand that I'm some kind of missionary. I've already written the first 5 books and expressed everything that should be expressed. If I write Dubhe and complete the structure of the world system, I can avoid such misunderstandings. And why did I write Fugue first? Not only was the story the most interesting, but it was also the foundation of the worldview. The most complete and macroscopic expression of the conceived world was Spiritual Mountain, and the writing of Dubhe was the final perfection. He could finally heave a sigh of relief and get himself a bottle of good wine. Many readers were asking what the next book would be about. I'll announce first, of course I'll write a new book. I'm now a professional web writer, doing what I love. The new book is expected to be released in late July, but I won't announce the title for now. I'm sorry that I'll have to make everyone wait for a while, because according to my habit, I'll only start writing when the main structure of the story is complete. Actually, I've already started writing this new book when I was writing Master of Earth, but I'll only start writing it in the second half of this year. In the meantime, I'll have to add a lot of material to enrich the content and plot. After Dubhe is finished, I'll go to Gusu and Jinling to collect historical stories, because the main setting of the new book will be there. As for the content of the new book, I can reveal a little bit. It'll take place in the contemporary era we're living in, and it's a strange story in an urban setting. Around us, in our daily lives, in the streets and alleys, there may be all kinds of demons. They're no different from ordinary people, and ordinary people can't tell them apart. For example, your company's boss may be some kind of monster, and a certain city girl that you're infatuated with may be the legendary fox demon. Before Dubhe is finished, according to the usual practice, I'll post a post in the book review section to solicit new side characters. When the time comes, I invite all readers who are interested to volunteer. Maybe someone will ask, will this new book have any connection to the story of heaven, earth, man, ghosts, and spirits? I can answer loudly, it can't be said that there's a connection, but it will definitely be. Because I've already constructed a world of words, which is a world weaved from reality and imagination, beyond but not separate from it. The world described in the first 6 books is already complete, and I have no intention of weaving more. But for those who live in the modern era, they may also appear inadvertently. Therefore, Little Yuzi, Mr. Zhang, Bai Xiaolu, Mei Shi, and other characters may appear as modern people, doing their own things in this new story. In the modern city, you or I may also appear, so let's all play side characters together. Of course, there's also the most popular, but also the most controversial, Feng Junzi. As long as he appears, he will cause all kinds of climaxes. Then, he will definitely appear, no matter who likes it, no matter if he has time or not, I'll invite him to appear. Chapter 365. When the sun showed half of its face on the horizon, the big bear finally walked into a village. It stopped beside a well, panting heavily. It seemed that it was also very tired from the journey. It was still early, and it was not the busy farming season. Most of the people in the village had not left their houses yet. Only a girl came to the well with a large clay pot. The bear only stopped when it saw the girl. It held the edge of the well with one paw and pointed at Yola and the others with the other. It gestured anxiously at the girl, but no one knew what it was trying to say. The girl looked in the direction the bear was pointing at. She was surprised to see so many strangers in the village. She turned to the bear and asked, "Wei Wei, did you bring them here?" "That person is holding my headscarf." The blue cloth in Yola's hand was the girl's headscarf. It seemed like the bear belonged to her family too. Joseph was supposed to step forward and say something. He was never a rude person, but at this moment, he was abnormally stunned. He stood on the spot like a stone statue, leaning on his cane. His eyes were fixed on the girl. It was Shima, an ordinary village girl from the countryside. She did not wear a headscarf when she went out to fetch water in the morning. Her soft long hair hung loosely down to her waist. Although she was wearing a coarse cloth dress, it could not conceal her beautiful youthful aura. The luster in her eyes was like crystal dewdrops in the morning glow. The bangs on her forehead were a little messy, and the way she looked at Yola and the others was also a little flustered. He had to admit that she had a unique natural elegance. But Yola had seen women before. How could a village girl make her lose her composure like this? No one could clearly see what the girl was feeling. It was like the spring breeze blowing green the fields, or the sun melting the ice and snow. The deeply sealed imprint in her soul was instantly awakened. Yola did not recognize her at first, but he understood why he had come to the human world. Ammonia's soul imprint was awakened. The next moment, he knew who he had met and what had just happened. The girl gazed at Jodi for a moment, and in the first rays of the morning sun she thought she had seen a god. Yomo appeared at the entrance of the village facing the morning sun. His entire body, including the cane in his hand, was shrouded in a layer of faint golden light. The disciples also had an indescribable feeling or reaction. They also saw the faint golden light that enveloped Yola's body. Their guide seemed to have become different in that instant. An indescribable aura filled the air with Yao Hui at the center. It was mysterious, solemn, and filled with warmth. In the distance, Madanzo and Link also felt this aura. They exclaimed in unison, "Great!" This is bad. Why would these two angels say two completely different things? Because they sensed Ammonius' aura. When Ammon left, he merged the god's tear left by Maria into his body and mind. When he saw the reincarnated Maria, his soul imprint would be awakened. This was, of course, good news. However, the aura that Yola emitted at this moment could not be concealed. It was possible that other spies would notice and expose his identity. Of course, the disciples around Yola didn't know about these things. Seeing Yola staring at a strange girl in a daze and losing his composure, someone quietly pushed him and said, "Dear guide, what's wrong?" Yola's body shook, and the golden light faded away. He returned to his normal appearance. Even though his soul was in turmoil, his expression returned to normal in an instant. He took a step forward and asked in a gentle voice, "Girl, is this bear your family raised? Is this bag of food your headscarf? This bear is very smart. It brought me here." The girl nodded and said, "Its name is Weiwei. My brother found it in the forest. It was very small at that time and had not fully opened its eyes. It grew up in this village and was very docile like a child. It suddenly disappeared a few days ago. So it ran out. I hope it didn't scare you." Yola had already walked in front of the girl and opened the package. "I see. Do you know why it brought us here and even offered its food to me? This apple has been picked from the tree for 4 days. It walked a long way to find me on the other side of the river. This blue headscarf is yours, right? It's called Weiwei. What's your name?" There was an imperceptible throbbing in his voice as he asked the girl a series of questions. The girl lowered her eyes slightly and replied, "My name is Maria." Yola's voice finally trembled. "Oh, what a coincidence, Maria. My mother is also called Maria." He was telling the truth. Yola's father was called Joseph and his mother was called Maria. Maria was a very common name nowadays, so such a coincidence was not surprising. However, Yola's heart was filled with emotion. He stared at the girl in front of him and felt as if he had found her in another world. The girl in this life was actually called Maria. Perhaps it was because Yola's gaze was too hot, giving off a sense of oppression. The girl quietly took half a step back and looked up. "Stranger, do you always hit on girls like this?" Yola finally realized that he had lost his composure and smiled in embarrassment. He also took half a step back and said, "I'm telling the truth. I feel very close to you when I hear your name. I don't know why this bear called Weiwei lured me here. Is it to see you? The bread and apple might be very precious to it, but I can't accept such a gift easily. You must know why it wants to see me, right?" The girl did not smile until now. She looked at Yola and asked the most important question, "Who are you?" Yola almost blurted out, "I'm Ammon," but he tried his best to reply calmly, "My name is Yola." "Yola." Maria let out a cry of surprise. She lost her grip on the clay pot and it fell to the ground. Yola pointed with his cane, but the pot did not fall to the ground and shatter. Instead, it strangely froze in the air. He took a step forward and picked up the pot, handing it back to the girl. "Take your things and don't break them again. Why are you so surprised when you hear my name?" The girl put down the pot and seemed to reach out to grab Yola's sleeve, but she did not touch him. She cupped her hands in front of her chest and said, "It's you. I've heard of your name and the legends. My little brother Lazarus is sick, very sick. I told my sister at home that if you could come here and spread your gospel, Lazarus would be saved. Weiwei is very smart. Although it can't speak, it understood what we said. My sister and I had to take care of my brother, so we wrapped some food for him with a scarf. I didn't expect it to go to you with the package in its mouth. It took 3 days to invite you here." The girl's tone was very urgent, and her expression was very emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yola quickly comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm already here. Take your time." He told Maria not to worry, but there was another person beside him who was very anxious. Wei Wei walked over and gently pressed its big bare paws on Maria and Amon's shoulders, as if it wanted to pat the two of them together. It raised its paws and pointed in a direction half a mile away from the village, whimpering as if it wanted to say something. Maria could no longer hold back her grief. Tears flowed down her cheeks. It's too late. You came back too late. Lazula passed away 2 days ago. At this point, she seemed to suddenly remember something. She knelt down in front of Yola and begged in a sobbing voice, "The legends about you are so magical. May I ask if you can bring the dead back to life? If you can, what price do I have to pay to ask you to do it?" Wei Wei saw Maria kneeling down, so it followed suit and extended its front paws towards Yola. Yola sighed in his heart. He didn't want to see Maria cry the most, but he had just reunited with her in the cycle of life and death, and now he saw her so sad. He bent down and said, "I also hope to be able to bring the dead back to life. If that's the case, you don't need to ask me for help. I'm willing to do everything I can to help you. Unfortunately, I don't have it. Even the gods can't reverse life and death. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to see you." His words had a deeper meaning. If the gods had the ability to reverse life and death, Amon wouldn't have found the reincarnated Maria here 300 years later. Maria, on the other hand, took it for granted. She wiped away her tears and stood up, whispering, "I lost my composure, I shouldn't have made such a request." Yora hurriedly shook his head, No, I completely understand that you have such a wish. I once had such a wish, much stronger than what you have now. Since I've accepted Wei Wei's gift, can you take me to see your brother? I want to express my sorrow and wish that he has entered heaven." Yola didn't know what he could do for Maria, but he always wanted to do something for her. So he made this request. Chapter 366. Joseph's question was rather puzzling. Even though the elders call us Shuma and look down on us, we still believe in God. My younger brother has always been a devout believer of Allah River. Maria replied with a hint of excitement in her voice, "Even though the elders call us Shuma and look down on us, we still believe in God." Joseph heaved a sigh of relief. "That's good. I might be able to save him. Maria, take me to his grave. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid we won't be able to make it in time." As he spoke, he wanted to hold Maria's hand, but he retracted it halfway. This was a subconscious habit imprinted in his soul. When he called her name, it was as if he was calling the former saintess of the temple of Isis, so he didn't touch her. Instead, he took advantage of the opportunity to hold Wei Wei's short and thick bare paw. Whether it was the Shuling or the Shuma, they all followed the same tradition. After death, their bodies were wrapped in white cloth and placed in a tomb made of stones. Then, sand was piled on top of the stones to form the tomb. The news of Joseph's arrival spread to the village, and many people rushed to the cemetery to see what was going on. Joseph stood in front of Lassalu's grave with a relaxed smile. He could still sense the faint traces of life in the grave. Lassalu wasn't really dead. It was just that he had stopped breathing, and his heartbeat was so weak that it was almost undetectable that people mistakenly thought he was dead. Amon had seen this phenomenon on the battlefield before. Joseph raised his cane and pointed at the grave. "Maria, your brother isn't dead yet. Open the grave, and he can return to the human world." Wei Wei seemed to understand Joseph's words. He ran over and dug the sand with his claws, then tried to move the stones on the grave. Joseph flicked his cane, and the stones and sand naturally surged to the sides. Wei Wei also rolled to the side with the sand and stones, and Lassalu, who was wrapped in white cloth, appeared in the grave under the sunlight. This scene happened in broad daylight. When people saw the grave suddenly open to reveal the body, they all retreated in fear and hid in the distance to watch. Joseph, however, walked to the grave and waved his hand. A leaf floated in the air and landed precisely on Lassalu's face, which was wrapped in white cloth. Then, he untied the leather bag at his waist and spat out a mouthful of water. A mist of water landed on the corpse and the leaf. The leaf moved slightly, and a weak voice came from below. God, where am I? Why can't I move? The closest onlookers heard the voice and shouted in horror, "Oh my God!" Jomo made the dead speak. Maria and her sister, Martha, had already rushed over. They untied the white cloth that was wrapped around their brother and helped the pale-faced Lazarus out of the grave. The young man looked very weak, but under the sunlight, he had come back to life. The news of Jomo's miraculous power to bring the dead back to life quickly spread through Bethany. Even though Joachim told Martha and Maria that Lazarus wasn't really dead, it was just a temporary state of suspended animation. But people didn't understand this and still preferred to believe the facts they saw with their own eyes. Joah had brought a dead man to life from the grave in broad daylight. It was impossible for him to explain it to everyone, and it was impossible to explain it clearly in real life. The so-called fake death, in people's eyes, was also a real death. Otherwise, Sister Ma wouldn't have been able to accept the fact that she had buried her living brother in the grave. Those who followed Joseph and were grateful to him were naturally more willing to preach such a miracle. Bringing the dead back to life was, of course, more amazing than reviving a person who had not yet died. From that day on, more and more people began to believe that Joseph had been appointed by God to save them from their suffering. This unexpected event gave Joseph unprecedented sensational influence and enormous popularity among the people. Maria's village was on the outskirts of Bethany, across the river from Joseph's hometown, Bethlehem. Further north was Selenger. Finally, Yola and his disciples stopped their continuous journey and temporarily settled in this village. They used this place as a base to preach Eloh's true faith to the people. Joseph tried to awaken the power of the origin for those who had the right faith, and told all the people the way to heaven or heaven. He publicly preached in the village synagogue the Sanlanite Bible. At the same time, some people were even more unwilling to listen to Joseph's preaching and see his appearance. Especially the Sanlanite priests, who had made all kinds of rules to restrict people. They didn't want to see people like Joseph. Because Joseph told them, the way we treat others is more important than how we wash our hands or what we eat. The Sanlanite priests forbade Joseph from preaching in the synagogue, so he went to the countryside to preach to his disciples and people. Maria became one of his most devout followers. His hometown was on the other side of the river, and Selenger was not far north. Why did Joseph stop in this village outside Bethany? The disciples didn't know the intention of the guide, and Joseph was accumulating his power. The so-called power was not to be strong enough to defeat someone, but to spread his faith deeply into people's hearts. At the same time, he wanted to spend as much time as possible with Maria. Joseph saved Lazarus' life, which was equivalent to agreeing to Maria's request at the well. Maria asked Joseph how she should repay him. Joseph smiled and said, "I want you to give me a gift." Maria said sincerely, "No matter what gift you want, just tell me, and I will do my best to find it and present it to you." Joseph was still smiling. "You've already given it to me. Do you still remember the package? The blue cloth that wrapped the food was your headscarf. Can I keep it?" Maria quickly replied, "Of course." After answering, Maria left Joseph's place and went to a place where there was no one around. Her face turned red, and her heart beat wildly. A grown man asking a girl for her headscarf as a gift. What kind of metaphor was this? If it was someone else, Maria would naturally have a normal imagination. But she didn't dare to think that way about Joseph. In the eyes of his followers, Joseph represented the existence of God, and he preached the faith of God. Women like Maria didn't even dare to touch him, and could only look up to his glory with a pious heart. Maria was indeed a very loyal follower. She often asked Joseph all kinds of questions, and he would answer them in front of everyone. One of the most famous questions was about how people should pray. This question and answer session was actually related to the bear named Wei Wei. Joseph would often lead the crowd in prayer and meditation after his preaching, purifying the soul with focused introspection. This was also a kind of power awakening ceremony. Only those who were talented and devout could awaken the power of the origin. Wei Wei didn't understand these complicated preachings, but it was the most loyal listener. Every time this happened, it would kneel down, put its front paws in front of its chest, and pray devoutly. It even became a part of Joseph's scenery. Joseph's preaching could make a bear listen so devoutly, which became one of the miracles people preached about him. Many people came to see him, and then were moved by his preaching and became his followers. In fact, when it came to praying rituals, the ones in Shalom were more complete and complicated. The way Bjork held it in the wild was much more solemn and sacred. When the priests in Bethany heard the story of the bear, they ridiculed the people, that Joseph is just a deceiver. He wants people to learn to pray like a bear. Does he want people to become as ignorant as a bear? Someone else said, a trained bear pretends to pray to attract people to listen to his preaching, but what's the point of praying like that? Joseph is just like those entertainers who perform monkey shows. This kind of questioning was very tricky. When Maria heard the news, she couldn't help but ask Joseph, respected guide, how should we pray? If Wei Wei only pretends to pray, will he also receive God's guidance? Joseph smiled, stood up, and said something that surprised everyone, actually, it's more important when you don't pray. Seeing that everyone was confused, Joseph explained, what is the purpose of praying to God? It's to purify your soul. Not to tell God how you believe in Him sincerely. The result of purifying your soul is reflected in your daily words and actions, and in how you treat others. The kind of person you become determines whether you really believe in God. There's no need to imitate Wei Wei, the bear, but you shouldn't laugh at him either. Your prayer is your prayer. Wei Wei may not understand what we're praying about, but he once found me with food in his mouth for 3 days and 3 nights in order to save his benefactor, and invited me here. This bear thinks of himself as a human, and knows how to treat others better than most people. Jonah calmly and sharply countered the question, letting the believers understand what true prayer was. When the news reached the priests in Bethany, they were panicked and angry at the same time. One of the elders said, we must stop Joseph. If this continues, I'm afraid everyone will follow him. Another priest said, it's best to get rid of him or imprison him, but what kind of crime or excuse can we use? Chapter 367. The priests of Bethany conspired to spread rumors, but this despicable plan did not come to fruition. Soon, another sensational rumor spread among the people. This news made it impossible for the priests to spread the rumor they had prepared, or it would arouse public outrage. Because people were saying that Yola was the deliverer, the son of Eloho, and the true Messiah in Elijah's prophecy. Some people had talked about John in the past, but John had died and hopes were dashed, so the discussion died down. However, Yola's appearance gave people new hope. Yola healed people along the way and preached the faith of Eloho. What was even more surprising was that he had the power to bring the dead back to life. People thought that this was a miracle that could only happen with God's approval. The news spread quickly in the Valg Plains as if it had wings, and the first appearance of this story was actually related to Maria, the girl of Bethany. He made an appointment to stay in the countryside of Bethany, and his influence grew. People often invited him, even if no one knew that he was the legendary son of Eloho. But he was a miracle doctor, which was enough to be respected, and many people would try to befriend him. A rich and powerful lord lived outside Bethany. He heard of Yola's reputation and invited him to his home. There would be many distinguished guests, and he asked Yola to preach and bless them at the banquet. Jesus had never discriminated against the poor villagers and the lowly Samaritans. Some people had already regarded Yola as only a guide for the poor and commoners, and thought that he would not accept such an invitation. To their surprise or disappointment, however, they all accepted the invitation. One of the disciples asked, "Esteemed guide, why would you accept an invitation to such a banquet? Everyone thinks that your arrival is to guide the suffering people to salvation. If you set your lecture at such a banquet, the poor will think that you want to stay away from them." Yola shook his head and said, "If someone says that, tell them that the faith of God belongs to everyone, rich and poor, noble and humble. Those who think that God belongs to themselves are on the wrong path. The banquet was set up in a luxurious courtyard. There was a beautiful fountain at the side that brought a trace of coolness. The guests all sat around the fountain, and the table was filled with delicious wine and delicacies. Some who had not accepted the invitation came to the courtyard, and they stood by the corner of the wall to listen to Joseph's speech. Jomo came barefoot, washed his feet in the fountain, and took his seat. At this time, a Shema girl walked over with an exquisite clay pot in her hands. It was Maria. The clay pot was filled with an expensive perfume. With a reverent expression, she sprinkled the balm on Jomo's hair and bent down to clean Jomo's feet with the rest of the balm. Then, she quietly retreated out of the courtyard. While she was doing these things, Johann didn't say a word. He didn't give in or avoid her. He just looked at her tenderly. The guests at the banquet were all stunned. The great lord asked in surprise, "Yao Qi, you're already the guide of countless believers, an honorable and cold man. How could you let a Shema girl get so close to you in front of so many people?" Johann was puzzled. He asked in return, if two people both owe a debt, and one owes 5 gold coins and the other owes 500 gold coins, and the creditors decide to write it all off, who do you think should be more grateful? The host of the banquet replied, "The one who owes 500 gold coins, of course." Johann smiled. "Since you think so, you should understand what I mean. For someone like you, who has wealth and power, the desire to relieve the suffering of your soul may not be so strong. But for her, the feeling is different, and my speech is no different. You invited so many distinguished guests to a banquet for me, but you didn't ask me to wash the dust off my feet. You didn't even greet me with a sincere hug. But she poured the precious ointment on my hair, and cleaned my feet. Since I can accept your invitation, I should accept her blessings. That is the true ritual of a pure soul." At this time, one of the guests suddenly cried out, "Messiah! That's a blessing for Messiah." This cry brought everyone back to their senses. They all remembered the prophecy of the prophet Elijah, the Messiah will come and lead all those who truly believe in the Alor River to build their homeland. Just like how Moses led the people of Talan back to their homeland to build a home flowing with milk and honey. The word, Messiah, means, deliverer. In the legends, people poured precious balm on the hair of the deliverer to show their reverence for the glory of God. The Shema girl was such a ritual. In her heart, Johann was the Messiah, the deliverer in the prophecy of the prophet Elijah. What did it mean for Johann to accept such a ritual in front of everyone? Although Yola himself didn't say anything, everyone had an answer in their hearts. Johann had never announced that he was the Messiah in the prophecy, the son of the Alor River in the legend of Talang. But when people finally realized this and spontaneously used such a ritual to bless him, he accepted it without rejecting or denying it. The prophecy of the Talang Plains spread for nearly 100 years had a far-reaching impact. When the priests of Bethany heard the news, they knew that spreading rumors to slander Johann would not be of much use. If people believed that Johann was the son of the legendary Alor River, then those who slandered him would be besieged and reviled. People had been waiting for the arrival of the legendary Talang king for nearly 100 years. If he wanted to deal with York, he could only get rid of him like how he dealt with John in the past. So the priests of Bethany decided to send a messenger to the elders of the Talang temple, reminding them to eliminate Johann as soon as possible. Allahan had made a covenant with Moses, "Do not kill the innocent. Do not take the lives of others for money or selfish desires." This was one of the 10 commandments that Moses left for the people of Talang. But now, these priests who enjoyed secular status in the name of Allahan were plotting to kill Allahan himself. All of this was clearly seen by Link and Madanzo, who were secretly guarding Johann. Coincidentally, the town that Johann had passed through not long ago also sent another messenger through Bethany and was about to enter the city of Talang. The content of the messenger's report was also about the threat that Johann's behavior posed, and to remind the elders that they should try to imprison or kill this man. Link said to Madanzo, "They came just in time. We'll catch these 2 messengers together and give them to Johann together with the evidence of their crimes." When Madanzo was about to answer, the two angels suddenly heard Amon's voice in their souls, "Let the messenger go to Talang." Even if they don't go, the elders of Talang are already planning the same thing. This is the test that I have to face when I come to the human world. You all know what the so-called test of fate, judgment of the end of days, is. It is the process of how a man becomes a god. But how does a god become a man? This is the proof I seek. I have to face that fate, and the real people who will be judged are the people who gave me that fate. The two angels understood that this was the fate that Johann had to face when he embarked on this path. As for what kind of proof their god was going to complete, Madanzo and Link were not very clear, so they asked in their souls, "My god, what can we do for you?" Amon's voice laughed and said, "Thank you for your protection, but there is no need to do anything more for me. If you are willing, you can prepare some bread and salted fish for me, as much as you can." Johann knew what fate he was facing, he was just waiting for the right time to meet it. The disciples did not know all of this, they were overjoyed that Johann was the prophesied Messiah. They were the earliest followers of the legendary king of Talang. When they thought of this, they rejoiced and were full of all kinds of beautiful longings for the future. Maria did not expect that her heartfelt blessing would cause such a big chain effect. Finally, one day, she could not help but ask Johann, "Dear guide, can you tell me? You are the Messiah. Although I believe it, and people think so, I want to hear it from your mouth." Johann looked at her and replied, "Do you really want to hear it from my mouth? Then tonight, please wait for me in your room." Anyone could imagine what it meant for a man to ask a girl to wait for him in his room in the middle of the night. But Maria did not dare to think that way. How could the legendary son of the Aloha, the great savior Messiah, have any unusual relationship with a girl like her? But she could not help but let her imagination run wild. Sitting in her room at night, her heart was beating like a deer. She was anxious to see Johann, but she did not know what to do when he came. What was going to happen? If Johann really wanted to do something or ask something, she would not resist at all. In her soul, everything was willing. But at the same time, she felt that it was not right. She did not even dare to touch him. They had been together for so long, and the only contact they had had was that time when she smeared the back of his foot with perfume. The night seemed to pass very quickly, but also seemed to pass very slowly. The restless Maria suddenly realized that she did not light the lamp, so she quickly lit the oil lamp on the table. The flame of the lamp was the size of a bean, and the dim light illuminated the small room. Then, Maria saw Johann. Joel's figure slowly appeared in front of Maria as the light shone. It was like a shadow turning into a painting before finally becoming a living person. From May 1st to May 7th, Chidian's monthly ticket doubling campaign will continue. Here, I sincerely ask for the support of all readers. Chapter 368. Joseph's appearance in this way was like a god quietly descending to the human world. Maria's surprise was indescribable, and she was about to bow down subconsciously. Yogi quickly reached out to hold her arm and said, "Maria, please remember, no matter what happens in the future, you don't have to be surprised. I came to see you like this today because I am ready to answer your question." There was a kind of enthusiasm in his eyes, as if it was wrapped in some kind of desire and expectation, and Maria simply did not dare to look up. She seemed to withdraw her arm and asked in a panic, "Respected guide, why do you look at me like that?" Yogi did not answer, but asked, "Maria, why do you not dare to touch me, what are you afraid of?" Maria bowed her head and said, "In my heart, you are the Son of God who came to the human world, absolutely, you are the Son of God. I do not dare to touch you, for fear of tarnishing your sacred glory, and if I am not careful, I will be doomed eternally." I clearly know the answer in my heart, but I still could not help but ask such a question during the day. I wanted to hear it from your own mouth, but I did not expect you to answer me like this. Yogi was still looking at her. "I came to answer your question, yes, I am that person." People are not wrong, but they may not understand the true meaning of Ilya's prophecy. Speaking of this, he sighed again and said, I somehow remember what happened almost 400 years ago. At that time, there were also two people. They were like you and me now, but their identities had changed. I finally understand how she felt at that time. Maria, you want to ask why I look at you like this? Wait until you pass the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle, then you will naturally understand everything. But at that time, you will still be the present Maria, the one I am looking for. Maria finally raised her timid eyes to meet Yogi's gaze. The test of endless arising and ceasing cycle? I don't quite understand what you are saying, but I have heard you explain the power of origin, that is a stop on the road to heaven. Do you think I also have hope? Yogi could not help but step forward and grab her hand. Maria's body trembled, as if there was an electric current spreading from his palm to her whole body. This time, she didn't pull her hand back. Jonah's large hand was so strong and warm. Maria heard Yola's soul-imprinted voice again, of course you have hope. Even if you can't welcome it in this life, you will welcome it in the future. Since I've found you, I'll definitely wait for that day, but I'm afraid Jory won't be able to wait for that day. I know what I'm going to face, that's why I came to find you today. Forgive me for not being able to tell you all that you do not yet understand, I only wish that you could feel the yearning of the soul. Peter and Judas had also heard what Maria had asked Joel during the day. Yoho asked Maria to wait for him in the room at night. He was going to answer her there. Peter was very curious, so he pulled Judas to a tree in the village and looked at Maria's house from afar. He wanted to know when Jojo would go. Judas asked, "Why are you so nosy?" Peter said seriously, "Our guide is the legendary Son of God. We, the followers of the Son of God, should also be guardians and protect the safety of the Son of God. Isn't this reason enough?" The two of them waited under the tree, but they did not see Yoho appear. In the middle of the night, the windows suddenly lit up, revealing the projection of Yoho's figure. Peter exclaimed in a low voice, "Wow! He really is the Son of God who descended to the world. He actually left just like that." Judas advised, "Our Son of God is so capable. Does he still need you to protect him here? We don't have to wait and see." Peter shook his head again and said, "If we stay here, we can prevent others from disturbing him." There were lights and shadows on the window, but there was no sound coming from the room. No one knew what Maria and Yoho were talking about. After a while, the lights suddenly went out. Peter said in surprise, "Hey! Why did you blow out the lights?" Judas rolled his eyes at him and said, "Don't talk when you blow out the lights. Do you know how to live? Don't you understand such simple common sense?" As he spoke, he grabbed Peter's arm and pulled him away without saying anything. The night grew darker, and the stars in the sky blinked quietly, staring at the village under the night sky. When it was almost dawn, Maria said to Yoho, "Your name has long spread throughout Shaling City. Many people there are looking forward to your arrival. If you like living here, I'm very happy. But this village is actually very close to Shaling City. If you walk fast, you can enter the city during the day and come back to rest at night. And I witnessed your magical appearance at night. I'm sure of one thing. Distance is not a problem for you." Yoho sighed and said, "When I enter Shaling City, I will welcome the fate that awaits me. Before that, I have to return to my hometown and bid farewell to Yoho." Maria took the initiative to hold his hand and asked with infinite regret, "Will that really be the case?" Jose said gently, "It really will be like that, because as you asked yesterday, I am indeed the person in the legend." Yoho decided to return to his hometown, Bethlehem, where he was born in this life, before completing his mission in Shaling City. He wanted to bid farewell to his parents. On this day, he took the disciples on their journey, but he did not ask the believers in the village to prepare food. When they left the village and walked in the wilderness, one of the disciples asked, "Respected guide, if we can't find the village, what will we eat today?" Yoho replied, "There will be food. Please follow my example and pick up a stone each and carry it with you." As he spoke, he reached out and picked up a stone for him. Seeing that the stone Yoho took was relatively large, the stones that the disciples picked up were also not small. Only Peter was the most quick-witted. Thinking that they still had a long journey ahead, he took a very small stone and put it in his pocket. They walked until evening, and indeed, they did not see the village. When they sat down to camp, Yoho said, "Take out all your stones and put them in front of you." Then Yoho led the disciples in prayer. After the prayer, he waved his staff and asked the disciples to look down at the stones in front of them. At some point, the stones had become flatbread, exactly the same size as before. All the disciples could eat their fill, but the flatbread in front of Peter was smaller than half an egg, just like the small stone he picked up. The next day, when they crossed the Jordan River and entered the territory of Bethlehem, they were met with an unprecedented welcome. 5,000 people came to the river to welcome them. No one knew who spread the news that the son of Holy Son Yoho would come today. Some came to treat the son of Holy Son Yoho, some to listen to Yoho's preaching, some to see the legendary son of Holy Son Yoho, and some just to watch the fun. The scene was noisy, and more than 5,000 people spontaneously gathered. One could imagine how chaotic the scene was. The disciples were exhausted from maintaining order for the son of Holy Son Yoho. They tried their best to make everyone see Yoho standing on the slope. Yoho looked at everyone at the scene with deep compassion in his eyes. His voice clearly reached everyone's ears, and he preached for the whole day. After dark, the crowd did not leave. The exhausted disciples begged Yoho, "Please let them all go. It's already dark, and everyone hasn't had dinner yet." Yoho shook his head and said, "This place is too far from the nearest village, and they can't make it back in time. Let's prepare dinner for everyone." A disciple said, "We don't have that much food. During the day, a child offered you lunch. There were 2 salted fish and 5 pieces of flatbread. You haven't had time to eat it yet." Peter thought of Yoho's miracle of turning the stones into flatbread and hurried to find the stones. However, the meadow was clean, and there was not even a piece of gravel. He wanted to search further away, but he was stopped by Yora. He heard Yora instructing his disciples, "Tell them to be ready. 50 of them will form a group and lead the people in prayer. I will personally distribute food to everyone." 5,000 people prayed on the grassy slope by the river bank. After the ceremony, Yoho walked into the crowd and distributed the bread and salted fish in the bundle to everyone with his cane. He worked until night fell and everyone was full. At this time, someone noticed the transformed staff and muttered, "It's really the son of Holy Son, and he's holding Moses' staff." Legend has it that when Moses led his people back to his hometown, he cooked a pot of soup and let everyone eat their fill. Yoho's staff was originally made for Ammon by Crazy Ol, and it contained the ventusalm, which was refined into a spatial artifact. When it was completely refined into a divine artifact, it was naturally an even more magical spatial artifact. Yoho had already asked Madanzo and Link to prepare enough food to carry with them. It seemed that he had already predicted what would happen today. The first thing Yoho did when he arrived in Bethlehem was to cause a great sensation. Those who praised him spread the story of the son of Holy Son everywhere, and those who were hostile to him were even more convinced that he was a deceiver and a great threat in the future. The priests of Bethlehem also made a decision to send a letter to Salem, warning the elders of the Temple of Aloha that an extremely dangerous person had appeared. Yoho was well aware of this, but he said nothing and returned to his hometown in the countryside of Bethlehem, a place called Nazareth. The villagers living in Nazareth were very familiar with Yoho. When he was a child, he helped his father with the carpentry work, making tables and chairs for people, and repairing carriages. Later, Yoho left home, and the villagers still felt sorry for him. When they talked about Yoho, they often sighed, "What a pity for that child of Joseph's. He could have become the best carpenter in Nazareth, and even made furniture for the king." Chapter 369. The people here had also heard of the name of the Son of God and rejoiced at the arrival of the Messiah, because God had appointed the Messiah to bring the gospel to the poor and to save all the oppressed people of Salem. As for the carpenter Joseph's son, also named Joseph, people thought that it was just a coincidence of the same name. But when the legendary Messiah arrived with his disciples, the people were surprised to find that he was that Joseph. People began to talk about it. How can he admit that he is the Son of God? Everyone here knows that he is the son of Joseph the carpenter, what tricks did Joseph learn in the Iga to confuse so many people? I watched him grow up. He is not the Son of God, he is just a carpenter in a small village. Amid the doubts, Joseph's preaching was no longer so popular, and he looked like a fraud and a liar. It was no wonder that the villagers would have such doubts and thoughts. They had always regarded Joseph as the same person as themselves, and it was difficult to accept his change. On the other hand, Joseph did not return to his hometown in glory. He still wore a coarse robe and held a cane made of tree branches. There was no crown on his head, no halo on his body, and he did not even sit in a carriage. Instead, he led his disciples on foot, and he still looked like an ordinary person like the villagers. If he was the legendary son of Allah, not only would the villagers not believe it, even his parents would have doubts in their hearts. If Joseph had become an official or made a fortune outside, and had a high status, people might have been more willing to accept the change in his identity if he had come with a splendid fleet of carriages in fine clothes. Joseph understood all this in his heart, so he no longer preached anything to the people of his hometown. After settling the disciples, he returned home and continued to help his father with his carpentry work. This made his parents feel very gratified. The son they knew was back. However, the disciples could not accept their Son of God only doing carpentry work at home, and after a while, they finally could not help but come to Joseph and say, "Dear guide, why did you return to the village to work as a carpenter? You are the Messiah prophesied by the prophet, have you forgotten your mission?" Yora was working on a chair with a hammer in one hand and a chisel in the other. He sighed and said to his disciples, "I have never forgotten what I came to do. I returned to my hometown and came to my parents' side. This is also a kind of farewell. I don't have much time left. Respect your parents. Never forget who brought you into this world and gave you life." This was the promise God made with Moses. John asked again, "Then what should we do?" "Continue to wait for you." Yora shook his head and said, "I'm still here, and you're already confused. If one day I'm gone, what will you do?" "I spread the faith of God, and you can spread it like I do." The disciples asked, "What should we do?" "Imitate me. You've all seen the bear named Vivi. Although he can't understand complicated preaching, he can still imitate people's prayers. Have you not learned anything after following me for so long? We come into this world with nothing and no knowledge. It's our parents who gave us life and raised us. We learn all knowledge and skills by imitating them. But in the end, you have to know clearly what you're doing, and truly understand and accept the faith you're pursuing. Go. Go to the villages and do what I've done, not stay by my side and sigh." Yora sent them to various villages to preach the gospel of God and heal people's suffering. He specifically instructed them, "Don't bring too many things when you go out. Pray for those who receive you warmly. If someone doesn't welcome your preaching, don't be angry. I've set a time limit of half a year, and I'll wait for your return in my hometown." The disciples who accompanied Yora were the most talented and perceptive among his followers. Yora awakened the power of the origin for them. He focused on teaching them the blessing magic, and taught them other skills according to their strengths. However, Yora did not explain the various levels of achievements like he did to the temple guide mages. Instead, he focused on explaining to the disciples what tests they needed to pass to embark on the path to heaven. About half a year later, the agreed time was almost up. The disciples came back one after another. They were travel-worn but in high spirits. They went to preach the gospel of Yora and spread the faith guided by Allah in the way Yora taught them. Although they were not as successful as Yora himself, they all achieved their own achievements. When the disciples gathered again, they excitedly talked about what they had seen and heard. The gospel that Yora preached was obviously more popular in other places than in Nazareth, and Yora still stayed at home as a carpenter. The disciples could not help but analyze the matter. In fact, they all knew very well what caused Yora's encounter in his hometown. Peter sighed and said, "Why don't the people of Nazareth understand that Yora is the real Son of God?" Judas said, "They have their own deep-rooted views, because Yora was born and grew up here, the son of an ordinary carpenter." When they heard the name of the Son of God in the past, they thought it was a coincidence. The name of the Son of God, Yora, will spread throughout the continent along with his deeds, and when people investigate his origins, they will still mention this matter. Peter slapped his thigh and said, "How can Yora be the son of a carpenter? No. The deeds that will be spread in the future must have a new interpretation, and the Son of God should be the Son of Allah, born by the influence of the Holy Spirit." Make such an explanation to people, and everything will seem perfect. The disciples had long been convinced that Yora was the legendary Messiah, the king of Salem who would build a new kingdom. As they talked, everyone began to look forward to the future. Some people thought that soon, Yora would become the king of Salem, the ruler of the Salem plains, and would lead the Salemites and the Samaritans to build an unprecedentedly powerful kingdom, replacing the Maro Empire. Just like the belief of God's guidance that Yora had spread, it had gradually replaced the authority of the priests of the temple among the people. The disciples' vision of the future soon turned into a discussion and debate. They were all thinking about what positions they could hold in the court of the new kingdom in the future. For example, who could be the prime minister, who could be the minister of military affairs, who could be the minister of internal affairs, and so on. Peter was the most enthusiastic. He thought that he could be the head of all the officials, and the minister of finance, of course, should be Matthew, who had once been the Maro Empire's tax official. When the discussion was at its most heated, the disciples suddenly heard Yora's voice. "Who do you think I am?" Everyone stopped talking and looked up, only to find that Yora had appeared in front of them at some point. Although Yora had been working as a carpenter at home during this time, he was very clear about the affairs of the disciples, and often went to the countryside of Bethany across the river to see Maria, so no one knew how he came back and forth, and no one had met him on the road. Hearing Yora's question, the disciples replied, "At first, you were thought to be the successor of John the Baptist, later, you were thought to be another prophet who brought the gospel, and now, everyone knows that you are the Messiah appointed by God, you are the Son of God who came to earth, and you will also be the King of Salem. Everyone is eagerly looking forward to you going to the city of Salem and completing the great work of the prophecy." Yora sighed and said, "You have followed me for so long and witnessed everything I have done, but you still do not fully know who I am, and today it is necessary to make it clear. Yes, I am the prophesied Messiah, and I have never taken the initiative to proclaim myself so. Because once people learn of my arrival, they will arouse the desire in their hearts, and the king of Salem they desire is a king who will conquer the Maros and provide them with everything for free, allowing the Salemites to rule the continent. That is not the king I will be. The seeds of my holy temple have been sown in the hearts of the people, and all you have done for the past 6 months is to spread this holy temple all over the Salem plain. When people learn the truth, they will probably be disappointed, and then angry, thinking that I am a liar. However, I am indeed the Messiah, and God did not deceive anyone. Unfortunately, I have seen that I will be engulfed in anger, and those who hate me will deal with me as they did with John the Baptist, and I will bear their sins. You may not understand why, because those people are also believers of God, but when people think that they act on behalf of the Supreme God, they also lose their souls, or it is only in the name of selfish desires. One day in the future, the faith guided by Allah will spread throughout the continent along with the gospel I have spread. The Olympian gods believed in by the Maros will retire at dusk and disappear into eternity, becoming a legend, and the deeds of me, Yora, will become another legend. People will also wake up to who I am and what they have done. I have come to earth not only to spread the gospel of Allah and build a temple in the heart, but also to fulfill my quest and vow. If I prove my vow, will people be able to usher in the world they have imagined? I do not know the answer, because at this moment, like you, I am still searching. I have only pointed out the way to heaven, and they are not in the magnificent and towering temple, but only in the soul. How to view divinity and human nature, and do they contain the same source? I hope to find the answer in Yora, but perhaps it is not the final answer. Will the world become a better place after me? I have left hope for the world, but the distance to heaven is both near and far. The disciples listened attentively to the preaching of the Son of God, and finally understood one thing completely, that Yora was not the Messiah that the Salemites had been eagerly awaiting for 100 years. It was not that he was deceiving anyone, he was the man, but people had their own assumptions in their minds. Chapter 370. Yola's words were not too abrupt, but in fact, some of the disciples already had a premonition. At this moment, they could not help but burst into tears. There were also some disciples who were very smart and foresaw some terrible things, and a chill rose in their hearts. Yola finally said, "It's almost time, pack up and get ready to go, we will go to Leng." That night, the disciples packed up and went to rest, but the 3 disciples, Peter, John and Jacob, could not sleep. They quietly walked out of the tent and went to a hill outside the village, wanting to pray quietly at a high place to calm the chaotic thoughts in their hearts. At the same time, Yola also walked out of the house and came to the mountain outside the village, calling, "Moses, Ilya, come out." Both of these angels had once been prophets of the Kurang people, and Moses had led his people back to the plains of Duk, and these people were the ancestors of the Kurang people. And Ilya had been the high priest of the shrine of Leng, and it was he who left the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. When the angels found Aman, who was reincarnating on earth, Link and Madanzo followed behind Yola's team to guard, while Moses and Ilya went to the place where Yola was going to investigate the situation in advance. After awakening Aman's spiritual imprint, Yola had already dissuaded Madanzo and Link, and when he was about to enter Leng, he called the 2 angels to appear again. Moses and Ilya came out of the forest and bowed to Yola. "My God, you have finally summoned us." Yola waved his hand. "Here, I am Yola, there is no need to bow to me like this. Today I want to tell you that I am going to Leng, and those who claim to be the people of the Alor River are going to execute me. You don't have to do anything, this is what happens on earth, and it is a testimony to human nature." Halfway up the mountain, the 3 disciples suddenly saw someone talking in the mountain, and standing in the middle was the Son of God, Yola. For some reason, they recognized the other 2 people, the spellgiver Moses and the great prophet Ilya. At this moment, Yola's appearance had also become the same as usual. His body was enveloped in a faint layer of golden light, and his clothes were dazzling white, making him appear extremely dignified and holy. Joseph knew that the 3 disciples had come and purposely let the incarnations see them. The 3 disciples watched silently, unable to suppress the excitement in their hearts. When Yola and the 2 angels disappeared, they quietly went down the mountain and returned to their tents. They woke up their companions and told them what they had seen during the night. While Yolanthi was meeting with the 2 angels, Zeus, the father of the gods and the god of the gods, summoned Apollo from the Olympian kingdom of indestructible eternity. Zeus raised his finger, and a projection of the human world appeared in front of him. It was the scene of Yora meeting with Moses and Ilya. He could even hear their conversation clearly. When the light dissipated, Zeus stared at Apollo without saying a word. His eyes were sharp and gloomy. Apollo felt uncomfortable under the invisible pressure of Zeus's gaze. He quietly took a step back and lowered his head. I mistook him for someone else. It turns out that John the Baptist is not the Aman of the Wheel of Reincarnation. Zeus spoke. You were looking for him, and so were the angels. But when he appeared, I only understood one thing. Yola had no intention of hiding his identity from the gods. You didn't even need to do anything. The people of Alor who believed in Alor wanted to get rid of him. Yola knew the result, but he still went to Alor. I want to ask you, but what can you do? This question stumped Apollo. Then use the local Maros or King Herod to get rid of Yola. It was no longer necessary. The priests of Alor were planning this themselves, and they didn't even need Apollo's help. Yola didn't say anything to Apollo in the human world, but his actions seemed to be mocking the god. What you want to do is actually the result I want. What else can you do? Apollo couldn't answer Zeus's question. He could only ask in confusion, Father of the gods, if Yola died in the hands of the people of Alor, what would happen to Ammon? Would he continue the wheel of reincarnation, or would he return to his divine kingdom? Zeus replied, didn't you hear what he said to the two angels? Ammon's spiritual imprint has been completely awakened, which means that his cultivation of entering the human world has been completed. His previous actions had already made his mind clear on the path he was looking for, and if there was a special opportunity, he would be able to find it. Then, he awakened Ammonius' spiritual imprint. Yola now is a bit like Pythagoras in the past. He has the soul of a god in the body of a mortal. As long as he is willing, he can return to heaven at any time. Even if someone killed Yola, they can't let Ammon get lost in the wheel of reincarnation. But his current realm should be higher than Pythagoras's. This is not a simple matter. Apollo was shocked. He asked again, why did Yola do that? I still don't quite understand the path he is seeking. Zeus narrowed his eyes and replied, do you remember what Ammon said when he was shot down by an arrow? He doesn't want to become a god like us. Even if all the temples in the human world are destroyed, he doesn't care. He wants to transcend that so-called ghostly cultivation method. To confirm the vow he made long before he transcended immortality. Now you see it. Ammon's shrine was indeed destroyed. Apollo said, but Ammon is also from the Allura River. The shrine of the Allura River still exists on the Dailang Plain. I find it strange too. Did you deliberately preserve the temple of the people of Allura River? Zeus nodded, then shook his head. I did not deliberately preserve it, nor did I deliberately not preserve it. I did not descend to ask the Maro Empire to order the demolition of the temple of Allura River in the Allura River. On the other hand, this is indeed the best way for the Maro Empire to rule the area. In fact, I also want to see how things will turn out. Apollo asked carefully, I'm afraid you didn't expect Yola to be murdered by the priests of the Allura River temple, did you? Zeus frowned slightly. No, I vaguely thought that the transcendence that Ammon pursues must be a process of seeking proof. If he doesn't build another temple, then what is about to happen is the best explanation. Apollo asked, then what realm does Ah Ling have now? Zeus said, at this moment, I can still see through him and understand what he is doing. If he returns to heaven now, no matter how different the path of seeking proof is, he will have the same realm as me. We are both gods, able to merge with the world created by other lords of heaven. This is his foundation. No matter what he has sought in the past 300 years, his accumulation has finally reached perfection. Apollo blinked. I still don't see the difference in the achievement he seeks. Isn't it just the one and only God? Zeus smiled bitterly and nodded. At least for now, that is indeed the case. But what will happen in the future, I am not sure. His ambition is so great that he did not hesitate to give up all the divine power in the world. After Yola's death, it also means that Ammon's last divine realm on the Allur Plains has disappeared. Even if the temple is still there, it is no longer his divine power source. This is a different path. I'm afraid that even he himself does not know what it means. Perhaps he knows what kind of god he will become, but what will happen to the human world? I am thinking, and he is also thinking, but no one can say for sure. Apollo revealed a thoughtful look. In other words, after Ammon returns to heaven, he will still be the same Lord of Heaven as before, but his realm has reached perfection, and he has the achievement of a god of gods like you. I think that if he has such a foundation, it will be the same whether he goes to the human world or not. Why bother going through all this trouble? Zeus put his hand on his forehead and said, this is the accumulation of knowledge, the clarity of the path found in the soul, and then the practice. Once he returns to heaven, he will need to refine all the knowledge he has accumulated in order to ascertain whether he will reach a higher realm. This is something that even I do not understand. Apollo stepped forward and said, Father of the gods, you don't seem to dislike him. Zeus looked at Apollo with a slightly mocking expression and said, I have no personal grudge against him. The divine realm of Olympus has spread all over the continent, the temple of Ammon has been abandoned, and I have completed the verification of the God of gods. What else can I argue with him? Even if I lose my divine realm in the future, I don't care. You see, the Potsdam Empire built by Marduk has now disappeared, and the continent believes in the gods of Olympus, but has Marduk ever come to me to settle the score? You will not understand before you reach the realm. Apollo said worriedly, do you mean that the divine realm of Olympus will disappear like Ammon's divine realm, or be replaced by the divine realm of Giat, and you don't care? Zeus waved his hand tiredly and said, it doesn't matter, it's actually a matter of the human world. Apollo, what's wrong with this eternal heaven? If Ammon wants to torture himself so much, then let him. If I were you, I would not care about all this, and I would not go to Tallinn to watch the show. Apollo was startled. So you already knew that I would go to Tallinn to witness all this? You said that Ammon wants to become another kind of god, and if he finally achieves his great ambition, he will even have a higher achievement than the god of gods. Don't you have any ideas about this? Zeus smiled helplessly. You really don't understand things. I can tell you that I have no ideas. My wish has been fulfilled. The Olympian heaven has become the ideal eternal world, and I don't need to do anything else. Apollo, I also want to ask you, if you want to become the master of heaven, can you succeed? For gods, this is not a matter of whether they want to or not, but a real wish. Apollo replied, I have such a wish. Chapter 371. The annual celebration of the sacrifice to Allah was coming. This was the grandest festival of the Silurians, and people from all over the world flocked to the city of Salem to pray and thank the gods for their blessings. Along with the sacrificial ceremony was also a folk carnival, with various celebrations lasting for a full 7 days. This celebration originated from a legend in history. Nearly 400 years ago, when Moses led the ancestors of the Silurians back to their homeland, they were blocked by an evil god on the way and were trapped in the mountains, unable to move forward and without food. Allah performed a miracle, and the dewdrops on the leaves of the grass turned into small frost-like snacks that were very delicious to eat. Picking up these snacks every day was just enough to fill the people's stomachs. Moses and the miners of Duk, who had experienced all this personally, knew that it was a god who called himself Bakri who was tempting them in an attempt to make the miners of Duk abandon their faith in the one and only God, Allah, and worship him. Moses walked down Mount Sinai with the 10 commandments that he had agreed with Allah, crushing Bakri's plot. But history had been passed down to this day, and it had changed. In his later years, Moses' assistant and Aesop's friend, Joshua, collected all kinds of information about Allah's miracles, the history of the people, the praise of the gods, and so on that circulated among the Silurians, and also compiled a Silurian Bible, which later became the scriptures in the temple of Allah. The snacks made of dew dripping from the leaves of the grass were the food that Allah gave to the people to show the miracles. That was what was recorded in the scriptures in the temple. Not only that, when the Duk miners left Igut, Seth, the king of the Ennead, sent an emissary to carry out a series of obstructions, and Moses and the others suffered greatly. But in the current records of the temple, things were completely reversed, and the series of miracles that stopped Moses and the others became Allah's means of punishing the people of Igut, and it was to stop the pursuers of Igut. Word of mouth formed the historical memory, as if only such a legend could make their God appear perfect. However, the adaptation of history also raised another question. If their God, Allah, was really that omnipotent, why did Moses and his people suffer so much? The explanation given by the priests of the temple was that it was a test by God. In fact, Ammon himself had not yet transcended eternal life at the time, otherwise it would not have been so difficult to bring Moses and the others back to the plains of Duk. Nearly 400 years had passed. Every year, at the legendary time, people from all over the world would flock to the temple of Allah to thank the blessings of the past and pray for more blessings from the gods. The celebration was also a folk festival, and the city of Salem would be crowded with people, so Yoran chose to go at that time. Our guide, said Peter, you have made a wise decision. When the Savior appointed by God comes to this world, he is bound to encounter all kinds of hardships, and Satan will bewitch people to hurt you, but there are many people who respect and love you, and those sinister enemies will not dare to act rashly. Yoran, however, shook his head and said, choosing to go when there are the most people is not to let the people protect me, but to let more people hear the echo of Allah and witness my appearance. There were still a few days before the celebration, and Yoran led the disciples across the river and returned to the village where Maria was in the countryside of Bethany, which was the base they had stopped at some time, and it was also very close to Salem, making it very convenient to go back and forth. After crossing the river this time, they took a road further north than the one they had taken, located in the remote hills of the wild. In a valley, they met a group of people with terrifying faces. Seeing people passing by, these people cowered in shacks made of branches and did not dare to show their faces. Yoran stopped and ordered the disciples to find out who they were, and when the people heard that it was the Son of God, Yoran, passing by, they came out of their shacks and knelt in the valley and begged, "Are you the Son of God? We have heard of your name and deeds, please have pity on us, and pray for your salvation." It turned out that these people had a strange skin disease, their faces and bodies were covered with terrible scars, and the disease was contagious. The priests in Salem could not cure them, and fearing that more people would be infected with the strange disease, they ordered them to leave the city and live in seclusion in the wilderness. To return to the city, they had to get permission from the priests to confirm that they had recovered. Although the priests of the Holy Cathedral could not cure the disease, their detection magic could determine who had the disease and whether they had recovered. The disease was indeed difficult to cure, but fortunately they met Yoran today. Yoran reached out and stroked the top of each person's head, his fingertips carrying a faint, imperceptible golden light, which sank into each person's body, as if a gray mist had dispersed, and then the terrible scars scabbed and fell off. Yoran waved his hand and said, "Now you can return to Salem to see the priests, and after the examination, the priests will announce that you have recovered." The group jumped up in joy, cheering as they ran through the forest towards the city of Salem in the north. They had been living alone in despair for a long time, and the sooner they saw the priest in the city, the sooner they could reunite with their families. Everyone could not wait any longer. Only then did people realize that he was the Son of God who had come to earth. And today, Maria did it again at home, which seemed unnecessary. Judas could not help but say, "This balm is too expensive, Maria, you should save the money to buy more useful things." A gloomy look flashed across Maria's face. In fact, she knew better than Yoran's disciples what was about to happen, and she was just expressing her feelings in this way. Yoran said, "Let Maria do this. She is expressing her love and generosity to me, and she will become part of the legend." Seeing this scene, the clever Judas vaguely guessed something and asked, "Respected guide, you should know very well that your enemies hate you. You have talked about the kindness and forgiveness of the Savior. Now I would like to ask, what kind of people are unforgivable?" Yoran sat up straight with his hand on the back of the chair and told his disciples a story. There was once an official who owed a huge sum of money to the king. The angry king ordered, "Sell his wife and children as slaves to repay the debt." The official knelt on the ground and cried, "Please have mercy, your majesty. I can't repay such a huge sum even if I am sold. Please wait patiently, I will definitely find a way to repay the debt." The king knew that he could not repay the debt, but he took pity on him and forgave him. The official walked out of the palace and immediately bumped into a servant. He grabbed the servant and shouted, "Where is the money you owe me? When are you going to pay it back?" The servant begged, "Please give me a little more time, I will work hard, and I will definitely pay it back." But the official did not let it go. He grabbed the servant and shouted, "The deadline is up, you have to pay the money immediately, or you will go to jail." He grabbed the servant and sent him to jail. When the king heard this news, he did not say anything and also ordered the official to be sent to jail. The story ended here. Yoran looked around at his disciples and said, "People who think that they should be forgiven for their actions but cannot forgive others are unforgivable." Chapter 372. The grand celebration finally began. Thousands of people gathered in Canlang, and it was lively and jubilant. People came from all directions, and every street became crowded. Yo and his disciples also left the village and headed for Salem. He did not hold the staff that was made from a tree branch in his hand. On the night he met the two angels, he had already returned the staff to Moses. Yo no longer needed the divine artifact. The disciples said, "Dear guide, many people in Canlang are looking forward to your arrival. Everyone will come to welcome you. In order to see you in the crowd, you'd better not walk." Yola thought for a moment and nodded. "Go to the village in front and borrow a donkey for me. Tell the owner that Yola will use it and will return it soon." Ilya and Moses had been in front to clear the way, but they had been persuaded by Yola to leave. However, Madanzo and Link were still following behind. Although Yola had dissuaded them, he did not order them to leave. At this moment, Link suddenly said, "There seems to be a legend in the Canlang Plains." When the Messiah came, he did not ride on a warhorse, but a gentle donkey. Madanzo was stunned. "Is there really such a legend?" "That's easy. I'll turn into that donkey." Link said, "Didn't Ammonius tell us not to interfere with Yola's affairs in the human world?" Madanzo shook his head. "This is not interference. We did not do anything else. Anyway, Yola has already ordered the disciples to find the donkey. Go quickly, let them find it." The two angels quickly went around to the village in front. Madanzo turned into a donkey, and Link turned into the owner of the donkey. They stood at the intersection with the donkey. There were several donkeys in the village, but the one that Madanzo had turned into was the most conspicuous. The disciples came to borrow the donkey according to Yola's words, and Link gave it to them without hesitation. When the people heard that the son of Saint Yola had arrived, they all rushed out of the city to welcome him. The huge crowd cheered and shouted the name of the son of Saint. Some even bowed on both sides of the road. The people in front took off their robes and spread them on the road. Some people even broke off twigs with leaves and spread them on the ground. "Let Yogi on his donkey pass." Along the way, people cheered, "Messiah, our savior. He's here." The huge crowd advanced slowly, and just like that, the saint rode his donkey into Tulang City. When the elders of the Arrow River Temple heard that Jomo had arrived, they conspired to get rid of him. An elder said, "There are too many people now, it's not easy to make a move. There are many people who believe that Yola is the Holy Son. If we capture him in public, I'm afraid it will incite a rebellion, and he will easily escape." Another elder said, "We can wait until the last night of the celebration. By then, the people who have gathered from all over the world will have dispersed." The first elder said, "It's best to capture him when he's alone. He has a lot of followers, so it's best for us to bribe a spy." Another elder nodded in agreement. "That's what we should do." What was more important was how to put him on trial. He had to convince the people that he was a liar who pretended to be God's guide. If that happens, his followers will turn to hate him. At this moment, another elder said, "There's no need to worry about putting him on trial. If he claims to be the savior, but can't even save himself, then it proves everything. But for the next 7 days, are we going to endure him preaching to the people in front of the temple? No, I'm going to find him. Don't forget, there's still the governor of the Maro Empire here. What will the Maro people think of the self-proclaimed Messiah?" Yogi finally arrived in front of the Arrow River Temple. This temple was first built in the era of David Solomon. After hundreds of years of repair, it had become more and more magnificent. It was far away from all the buildings and was on a high ground in the city. In front of it was a very large square. This was also a place where people gathered. As long as there were more people, there would be opportunities to make money. The small merchants and peddlers would naturally not miss this opportunity, not to mention the people of Tulang who were especially good at doing business. The disciples were a little shocked by what they saw. There were many wandering peddlers carrying parcels, carrying baskets and pushing carts. Carrying baskets, pushing small carts in the crowd, the sound of hawking rose and fell. These were secondary. Some people obtained the permission of the temple priests, or cooperated with the temple priests. They set up sheds in the plaza of the temple and sold all sorts of birds, persuading the pilgrims to buy them and release them as offerings to the gods. The birds in the square were flying everywhere. Feathers and bird droppings fell from time to time. The birds that were caught were frightened and dying in the cages. Many of the birds that were bought to be released fell to the ground in a small forest not far away. Someone caught them again and sold them again. Yogi came to the square and closed his eyes. He heard the sorrowful cries of all kinds of birds. His expression was solemn and there was a hint of anger. Seeing him like this, the followers realized that the Son of God might have something to say, so they waited quietly at the side. Sure enough, Yogi opened his eyes and said, "Those who truly follow me, go and destroy the stalls that are selling birds. Release all the birds outside the city." Jorg had never ordered his followers to do anything for him before. Today was the first time he had done so. Everyone clearly heard the Son of God's words. They pushed the stalls down, took all the cages, and released the panicked birds onto the city wall. After the chaos, the square became quiet again. Some people were shocked by Yogi's actions. He was offending the priests of the temple. To set up a shed and sell birds for sacrifice to the Arrow River, one must have the permission of the priests. The so-called permission was given to the priests. In fact, many of the stalls were opened by the priests themselves. It was a way to make money in the celebration. A priest walked out from the crowd and questioned Yogi, "Who are you? How can you do this? The birds sold in these stalls are for people to release. The pilgrims buy these birds and release them as a sacrifice to the gods. The birds obtain freedom and symbolize the salvation of the gods. You are encouraging people to destroy the stalls. This is blasphemy against the glory of the gods." Yogi unceremoniously scolded, "If they are domesticated chickens, do they need people to release them?" These were all birds that the stall owners had sent people to capture from the wild. Who knew how many innocents had died or been injured in the nets? Locked in cages, they were tortured. Released in the plaza, they suffered all sorts of fright. Once they flew into the forest, they would be captured by the stall owners. Some people are doing this because they are greedy for the money in the pockets of the pilgrims. They are offering sacrifices to the gods to show the benevolence of the gods. God does not enjoy all of this. The money only falls into the pockets of the greedy. Don't think that the people here do not know that the stalls selling birds are related to the priests of the temple. Otherwise, they would not be set up in the square of the temple. What they are doing is blasphemy against the glory of the gods. If you think that releasing those caged birds is offering sacrifices to the gods and showing the benevolence of the gods, then why are you keeping them in cages and selling them? You should release those birds yourself. Isn't that right? The crowd roared. The priest's face turned red. He was so angry that his body trembled. He did not know how to refute. In fact, many people knew that the stalls selling birds were opened by the priests. Even if they were not opened by the priests must have received some benefits. However, Yogi still said this in front of everyone. This was equal to offending the priests who profited from the stalls. He really had guts. Who had the guts to do this in the square of the temple? He was looking down on the most authoritative person in this land. The priest was also very puzzled. At this time, someone shouted, "Priest, look carefully. This is the Son of God Yogi." As soon as the priest heard this name, he shivered for no reason and slipped into the crowd with his tail between his legs. The people cheered and shouted Yogi's name. They gathered around the Son of God. Yogi raised his arm to signal everyone to be quiet. Then he began to preach to the people in the square of the temple. He did not know how many times he had preached, but today's audience was the largest. His voice was deep and pleasing to the ear. In such a large plaza, everyone could hear him clearly. Although he was wearing an ordinary robe, he seemed to be shrouded in a holy radiance. His followers firmly believed in his identity. No matter how they looked at him, they felt that he was dignified and holy. He looked like a mortal, but it also added a simple sense of mystery. After preaching, Yogi led the people in a prayer ceremony. When night fell, the city was still very crowded. Pilgrims from all over couldn't find a place to stay, so they rested on the roadside or in the open space. Yogi took his disciples out of the city and returned to the village of Bethany. The next day, they entered the city again. The next day, when Yogi continued to preach in the temple square, the crowds suddenly parted to make a path. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe and holding a luxurious staff walked in. Many people here knew him. He was one of the 12 elders of the Aluo River Temple. It was said that he was also a great mage. The people bowed to the elder. This was a habit they had developed over the years. The elder nodded to the people with a humble expression. He walked in front of Yogi and said calmly, "Yogi, I heard that you claim to be the Messiah in Elijah's prophecy. Yesterday, you incited the people to destroy all the stalls selling birds in the square?" Yogi replied calmly, "Elder, if you call me that, I won't deny it. As for why I destroyed those stalls, you should know the reason better than me. Do you want to accuse me?" The elder shook his head, No, I don't want to accuse you of that. You have your reasons for doing that. It will make it easier for you to win the hearts of the people. But those stalls were set up in the temple square with the permission of the Maro people. They also have to pay taxes to the Maro people. I came here to ask you a question. Should the people of Shellin pay taxes to the Maro people? The people bought those birds and released them as a sacrifice to Aloha. Chapter 373. This was a very sinister prank. The elder's question contained a trap for Yorgu. Yorgu was currently preaching in the plaza. If he answered that he shouldn't pay taxes to the Maro people, not only would he be violating the laws of the Maro Empire, but he would also be guilty of inciting a riot. He would be taken away by the Maro soldiers on duty. However, if he answered should, he would lose the support of the people. The Messiah that people were looking forward to was the savior of the Quelling and Suma people. They believed that this king of Quelling would lead them to build a new nation, conquer the Maro Empire, and rule the entire continent. Moreover, the elder's words had a more important premise. The people were buying birds to sacrifice to the Aluo River, but they had to pay taxes to the Maro people. How could they explain this? Yola was well aware of the elder's tricks, but he only sneered. He reached out and took a coin from a disciple. He raised the coin and asked the crowd, "Whose portrait is on this coin?" The crowd answered, "It's Kaiser." Kaiser and Augustus were not only the names of the two Maro rulers who once shook the continent, but also the titles of the Maro emperors. Yorgu shouted, "Then let Kaiser return to Kaiser. God doesn't need it." Have you ever heard of using coins to buy the privilege of entering the kingdom of heaven? It could only spend money to buy a space in the temple square from the priests, and set up a display to sell the birds. People would then buy the birds and let them fly. He said that he was offering sacrifices to the Aluo River, but in the name of God, he harmed living beings. God will be angry. With a flick of his finger, the coin flew out and landed at the elder's feet. He cleverly escaped from the elder's entanglement, but he didn't expose the elder's trap. As long as the Maro Empire was the ruler of the continent, and the coins used here still had Kaiser's portrait, the merchants would naturally have to pay taxes to the Maro Empire. What did Yorgu tell the people about the real world and the ideal world? What was the world he saw? What was the kingdom of heaven? The Maro people conquered the continent, but they also provided roads, irrigation works, and stopped the conflicts between the tribes. It wasn't just the merchants of Quelling who had to pay taxes. Everyone under the Maro Empire's rule had to pay taxes, including the Maro people themselves. But what about the heavens of the Aluo River? What God needed was not these, but the true faith in the soul. Only by going through all kinds of tests could God reach the kingdom of heaven that transcended eternal life. It was another world, a kingdom that was completely different from the human world. The citizens were all filled with admiration as they listened attentively to Yola's speech. That elder found himself rebuffed and stood there awkwardly. It was he himself who had come to say that he had a question to consult with York, and in a tone that was certainly consulting. Now that Yorga had generously taught him in front of everyone, this honorable elder had also become one of the audience. He couldn't show the dignity that he should have in front of Yorga. He was simply taking the initiative to come out and embarrass himself, using his noble status to support Yao Qian. With a thought, the elder made another move. He tightened his grip on his staff and quietly cast the cursing divine spell. No wonder he was a great sorcerer. He could cast spells among thousands of people without leaving any trace. He wanted to make Yorl's body feel heavy, his knees weak, and his head and shoulders lean forward. He wanted to make Yorl kneel down in front of him for no reason. The mysterious divine arts were unleashed, but there was no reaction at all, like a clay ox entering the sea. Yorl still stood there and preached to the crowd. Even his intonation was not disturbed at all. In terms of magic, Yorl was much more brilliant than this elder. He knew what the elder was doing, but he didn't care. The best way to deal with a curse was to pray for blessings. Yorl had condensed two gods' tears in his body and soul. One was passively refined, and the other was actively integrated with his soul imprint. His body was also an excellent artifact for casting a blessing. Even if he didn't do anything, the elder's curse would not have any effect. The surrounding people naturally didn't know any of this. But at this moment, something that made everyone dumbfounded and excited happened. The elder suddenly put down his staff, his knees weak, and his body leaned forward toward Yorl and knelt. He pressed his hands on his staff and pressed his forehead and mouth against the ground. Then he straightened his arms and propped his upper body up. He bent his arms and kowtowed 3 times in a row, completely ignoring the dust on his robe and forehead. The 12 elders of the Aluo Temple of Shaling City were supreme existences that represented the authority of the gods. They had never bowed like this to anyone other than the statues of the gods. Only the Son of God could enjoy this kind of treatment. The elder's actions undoubtedly showed that he had wholeheartedly acknowledged Yorl's identity. The crowd was extremely moved. Since the elder had knelt, the crowd naturally couldn't stand. In an instant, the crowd in the temple plaza knelt down. The disciples, too, prostrated themselves to the ground in obeisance to their guide. Only Yorl was still standing. The last to kneel was the donkey behind him. No one noticed a detail. Just as the elder's curse failed, the donkey behind Yorl suddenly raised its front hoof and lightly stomped on the ground. The elder then inexplicably knelt down. It wasn't because he wanted to, but because he was pressed down by an irresistible force. The elder struggled to get up, but the donkey stomped on the ground again. The elder who had just straightened his arms could no longer support himself and knelt down again. The donkey stomped 3 times in a row, and the elder kowtowed 3 times. At this time, the crowd in the plaza also knelt down. The donkey knew when to stop. It took advantage of the situation and bent its front hooves in a kneeling posture. At the same time, it lowered its head and touched the ground. The donkey knelt down, but the elder stood up. Because of his actions, everyone in the plaza knelt down to Yorl. The elder was so ashamed that he could die. He simply didn't have the face to see anyone. His figure turned into a green smoke and quickly floated away. He quickly disappeared into the temple. The elder left behind a document on the same day that he resigned from his position as an elder of the temple. From then on, he closed his doors and refused to meet any guests. Yorl turned around and glared at the donkey, intentionally or unintentionally, but he didn't say anything. In this kind of situation, what could he do to a donkey? He opened his arms towards the crowd and said, "Rise." When Yorl entered Shirlang, he had already decided not to display any miracles that could disturb the faith of the people of Mihua. If he wanted to make the elder kneel, Yorl had plenty of methods. There was no need for the donkey Madanzo to interfere. What Ural wanted was not to kneel down. Since he didn't want to do it, he couldn't force it. What he wanted was the sincere faith of the spirits. If he could use that kind of method to seek for the state that he was pursuing, why would he bother to come to the human world? The effect of Metatro's prank was very good. Everyone knelt down in front of him. But when Ural left Shirlung, he ordered his disciples to bring the donkey back, fearing that the village would be returned to its owner. What had happened in the plaza had caused a St. Hall elder to close his doors. This was a public humiliation, and with his status, he definitely could not accept it. But the others didn't know the inside story, and the elder didn't tell anyone. He was too ashamed to speak of it. The other 11 felt a chill and fear in their hearts. If they had only wanted to arrest Ural before, now they had unanimously decided to execute him. Ural preached in the plaza during the day, and returned to his village at night. He entered Shirlung 7 times, and did not ride the donkey for the last few days. It was now the 7th day of the festival, and the celebration was coming to an end. The people of Shirlung were packing their things, and would leave the next day. On this day, Ural didn't leave Shirlung. He ordered his disciples, "Go find Whale and Flom. I'll ask him to prepare dinner for us today. It'll be in a quiet place where we won't be disturbed. Go wait for me there." Whale and Flom were the patients that Ural saved in the forest, and the only one who ran back to Ural to thank him. The disciples left, but Ural asked Judas to stay behind. There were bound to be mundane things to do in the human world. Ural and his disciples naturally needed to spend money to buy various things, and to prepare the necessary supplies for their travels. Judas was very capable and meticulous. He was in charge of managing money and purchasing various items, and he spent most of his time alone. Ural brought Judas through the streets and alleys of Shirlung. There were bustling crowds everywhere, but strangely, no one recognized Ural. Ural preached to the people in the plaza for 7 consecutive days. When he stood in the middle of the crowd, everyone knew that he was the Son of God. But when he blended into the crowd, wearing an ordinary robe and bare feet, he looked no different from the rest. Even if someone walked past him, no one would realize that he was Ural. Shirlung covered a large area, thanks to the scale built by Link in the past. There were even some mountains, fields, and forests in the outer city. Johann brought Judah out of the inner city and into the outer city. He stopped in a remote place and turned around. "Judah, my disciple. Do you understand why I gave you such a name?" Judah's eyes widened in shock. "You're right." Judas's shoulders trembled, and he looked as if he had been waiting for something for a long time. He prostrated on the ground and said, "Respected guide, perhaps I should not address you as the Son of God, because you are that person. I didn't know the reason at first, but not long ago, I finally understood." Ural said calmly, "Congratulations on passing the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle. May I ask what you understand?" Judas replied, 400 years ago, Shirlung had not yet existed, and the Great Flood had not yet arrived. This was a place called the town of Duk. A young miner by the name of Amen was lucky enough to excavate a precious god's tear. At that time, the lord of the Cape States of Igut, Rod Drick, brought a candidate adoratress to Duk in search of the god's tear. When the god's tear appeared, Lord Drick ordered his scribe to bring 30 gold coins to the young miner. But the scribe only gave the young miner 30 silver coins, and took away the god's tear in the name of goddess Isis. The young miner was not only unable to pay the 20 gold coins of taxes that his family owed, but he was also unable to do so. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.